sounds of the Midwest side, those ruthless narratively driven podcasts you'll ever fun like. I'll be in call. We get so far, dice rolling below in the swamps, never solo, no snow to the Dogs of Warcry.
Dogs of Warcry is a Mortal Realms podcast focused on Warcry, a fast-paced cinematic skirmish game by Games Workshop. We talk about the lore, rules, games played, painting, terrain, campaigns, events, and everything in between. In episode 6, we take a little break to prepare for our upcoming narrative event on November 16th. So this episode is a rebroadcast of the Mortal Realms story phase, episode 46, which covers the Warcry Anthology. 6 short stories focusing on the Bloodwind spoils and the Chaos Warbands. We'll be back with a fresh episode on the 27th about running leagues. It's the one we've been the most excited to share. Welcome to the Warband. Your allies to the spoils this episode are...
I'm Davey, and listener, just for a second, it's just you and me, okay? So you know what's about to happen. We're about to get some puns. So let's decide, you and me. War cry or war crime? Let's listen together.
I'm Paul, and I was going to do a pun, but I'm not going to go there today.
Jeez. I'm Aaron, and remember, listener, no warman, no cry.
And this is Eric, Devourer. I hardly knew her.
I hate this show.
That's okay.
Hey, you hear that? That call from a great distance? Do you feel it? That beacon, that lure, that drive to parts unknown, summoning you to supremacy, to victory, to glory, to violence? In this episode, we're discussing the Warcry Anthology, with stories by a variety of Black Library authors. Contained within are tales of warbands, of warriors, of people who heard their own call and the aftermath of what they decided to do about it. How you doing tonight, gentlemen?
I don't know if I'm as confused as you are.
Tense right now.
Pretty good. For future note, Eric's going to read italics as a question.
That's a question.
Yeah.
Anything you put on that teleprompter, he will read. Yeah.
when you don't read it all before you're forced to read it on the mic, you get liberties.
I'm Eric.
No, that's half fun.
Oakland?
It's like whenever I do text to speech and there's a robot, like a machine voice. Never mind, this isn't funny.
No, it's cool.
This is nothing.
Hey guys, should we start talking about this book?
Mm-hmm.
The main reason why people are listening to this podcast?
Main reason I'm here tonight.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms, plus the Elgates. When the Ever-Chosen calls, the tribes of Chaos answer his war cry. Each does Archaon's will in their own way, and each has a part to play in the war to control the mortal realms. These are their stories.
Hey, guess what?
What?
I shortened it so they're not so long, so we don't have to read a novel before we talk about the novel.
I'll just say is that was all italics and there was no question mark.
I'm a professional, Eric.
Professional what?
Yeah.
All right, so guys,
Pretty much.
this is the story phase, and we start the story phase with the spoiler-free section. No spoilers. So right off the bat, let's talk about what this book even is. All right, so it's
There are blood spoils.
oh sure.
Bloodwind spoils.
Blood.
He did it again.
He did it again.
I just got to that part in the episode,
Yeah.
and I like.
Yeah,
It's
I
one of
was
those-
like,
For context, in the first episode of Dogs of Warcry, I called it the blood spoils, and Davey called me out, as any good editor would do. And I think because it was on the brain, I was trying to not physical editor of like cutting it. So I was trying hard to get it right, and when you try too hard to get it right, you just get it wrong again.
Plus, you infected Josh, and you made him get it wrong too. So that's the worst crime. Is you
That's
made
right.
him.
Or-
I love that he said it right, and then he corrected himself to say it wrong.
Or if everybody gets it wrong, are we right?
Oh, that's true. It's like
No.
the
Toe the line.
what's the? Excellent. All right, so this book is an anthology, so it's a series of short stories. So there's not a particular through line running through all of them, but rather it's independent stories, basically focused on each of the 6 Chaos warbands that have been released in Warcry thus far. It's generally set in the same spot, which is to say the Bloodwind spoil. Well, we'll talk about the wares first. I guess we'll go in the same order that we normally do in our spoiler-free section. So let's start with the when, which is basically who knows, right? There's no real timeline to speak of per se. We know that
one of the stories takes place over years.
Oh, sure.
Where some of them are happening within a night. But in terms of how it relates to, in general, Warcry is somewhat set after the Necroquake, because at least one of the Stormcast warbands is coming in to secure a
Storm Vault.
one of the Storm Vaults. But I don't know that you would have to say that that's the only time you have to play or read these. Like, they could have happened during the Age of Chaos. I mean, this is all...
Yeah.
It feels like the 8 points is like a land at time forgot.
Well, yeah, right. Like you said, because it's the 8 points instead of the all points, it exists anywhere on a spectrum from when it became the 8 points to the present.
Dumb question. When did it become the 8 points? Like, is that Realm Gate Wars or prior to the Realm Gate Wars?
After
Prior.
the Realm. Is it?
Prior.
Yeah.
The Realm
Sorry.
Gate Wars are a return of the Stormcast Eternals to the realms.
Right.
So Age of Chaos, when it was Archaon, one of Archaon's first military targets.
Now, if we're taking the base game as here's where we're landing, right? I think if I'm remembering correctly, the base game is set post Necroquake, because that's part of how some of the Night Haunt got in and that sort of thing.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
you can make that assumption, but there's nothing that directly ties this to the current. But it's a safe guess that it's occurring in the present of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But you have room to expand if you want.
Yeah, I think that maybe if we called it something like the Eternal Now, right, there might be stories added that incorporate future details. You could read it and then not know about the future details. It doesn't really matter. There isn't a context that is needed for these stories.
I'd rather call it Apocalypse Now. But
I'll call it a Stormcast Eternal now.
David,
how
what
now,
would you
brown
call it?
cow?
I'll call it. Let's move along.
All right, so we can get to the where, and this is what I was getting at before. So we are in the 8 points. I feel like we've maybe referenced it a few different times in the past. Some of our stories have been set there before. In fact, we talked about it quite a bit in the Dogs of Warcry episode. But this 8 points was the all points. It's the nexus that exists between all the realms, where there's like major realm gates to each of those realms, and it's sort of the interconnected web for each of them.
So this is a sub-realm that is the only place in the mortal realms that's connected to all 8 realms. That's
that
it.
we know of.
Yep. It says in the Warcry book.
Okay.
But yeah, so it includes...
Got the Warcry book.
And if it had been me
Yeah.
setting up the all points, I would have knocked one of those gates out.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be an 8 point start, because I feel like that was just a little bit of an oversight.
Sure, right?
Little
But you
bit.
knew he was
Little
coming.
You knew it was coming.
And Warcry itself, the setting for the box is set within the triangle of 2 highways that go to 2 individual realm gates, and the Bloodwind Spoils itself is the space between those 2 highways. So this is kind of an interesting thing where everybody in Warcry is presented as the things that are too small to actually be involved in the big battles, right? If they actually went on the highways, they'd be destroyed. They have no chance of standing up to Archaon's armies.
So you're saying that there's a constant kind of march to
Yes.
and from the Varanspire and the Realm Gates kind of thing?
Exactly. So that's what I read from the warband, or from the main book. And the other thing is that we do get a summary of what these warbands are. It's only about 2 or 3 paragraphs, but you can actually look in the Warcry book itself, and with that silhouette, you can read about the different warbands and get an idea of what the story is going to be. You won't have a plot necessarily, but if you want a spoiler-free description of what you're looking for, it's right there in the Warcry book.
So I think there's a couple cool ways to think of these highways. Obviously, you got like old Roman highways, where they built up, cobblestone, or just imagine the big pavings of that. They also, though, I think it was in the Realm Gate Wars, some of the battles, and I would be interested to remember which Realm Gates Sigmar was able to take back, because there could be a number of these 8 points that are under order control.
On the other side of the gate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So on the other side, I think I don't remember. I don't think Akshi was.
I think they got
Captured.
life. I think they got Akshi at heavy cost. They
Okay.
didn't get metal. Beast was a wild card still.
Yeah.
So
I remember in the book talking about like the road leading up to, I believe it was the Akshi Gate, or it could have been the Shimon Gate. Like, there is some pretty heavy, like, what is it? Infrastructure capabilities built by Dwarden and whatever. So, these could be like high highways on huge pillars with arches. They could be just cobblestone. They could be this, that, and the other. They could be spanning valleys and that sort of stuff. So I feel like you can imagine these highways any way you want. But I like the idea that, yeah, you're kind of that space in between. You're in the cul-de-sacs, you're in the mix mash, and you're kind of where those different forces coming from the different road gates. And in case of the starter box, you've got the shaman iron golems coming in, and you've got the untamed beast from Gur, and that's where their meeting is in the Bloodwind Spoils.
Nice, good job.
Hey, thanks.
Well, and the Bloodwind Spoils have a couple defining features about it that we can talk about without doing spoilers. Number one, when it rains blood.
When it rains, it pours blood.
Hence the name Bloodwind Spoils, right? Yeah. The other thing is that there is a larger city within this area. There's a nice little map in the Warcry book, and it's called Carne Grad.
Yeah, I was wondering, did you appreciate this? It was a little bit of a callback. It's got that Slavic root of Grad, which relates back to Kislev, which probably Archaon has still some memory from the world that was. It felt like, I don't think there was actually a Carne Grad in the old world, but it felt like a little bit of a subtle tie-in, which was pretty fun.
I thought it was a lot of fun.
And I thought I remembered, and I don't remember it enough to know, but I thought this was a city in while during the all points that was a high commerce or kind of marketplaces and place of wealth. But I don't remember, was it still called Carne Grad? Was it?
I don't remember that at all, but I'm not saying
doesn't matter anymore. That place is erased.
But that is also part of the setting, right? Like, this was something, and then it was order, and then it was chaos, and now it is Carne Grad. Right? There's a ton of history behind everything here.
And something that may be important here, but isn't as important later when we get to it. In the Proving Ground story, it kind of takes you into Carne Grad. So you start off kind of on the outskirts. There's like the gates of of the fortress that was, and the walls are no more. It takes you a little bit further, and you've got, they actually call it in some cases suburbs, or like the outskirts, and the outcasts and the mutated, and those that are that aren't welcome where the heavier fighting or stronger live. And then you get further into the city where it's more dense, etc., and you're fighting for more valued ground. So it's an interesting. I mean, I'm thinking of like it's a barbarian city. It's a chaotic, gangs of New York kind of feel.
It is civilization, and it is the first full-on chaos city that we've really seen. I mean, we have the Varan Spire. I don't think that's necessarily defined as a chaos city, more as Archaon's capital. This is the first actual chaotic civilization that we have fleshed out. So that's a cool new experience that we haven't seen yet before. And one of the other defining features about this area of the Bloodwind Spoil is that there are these glass shards or mirrored shards that do go around and can take someone's soul out from them. It's written into the Warcry rulebook itself, but it's also in some of these stories too. So it is a very dangerous, treacherous place that the setting is, and the people that we're talking to, one of the functional important things is that none of these people are heroes, right? They're all kind of like normal people, but
you define normal for me.
Well,
like, who are you hanging out with, Paul?
What I'm saying is that if this were an Age of Sigmar book, right, they would be somebody who would be given a name, described, and killed. They are more of the individuals who populate the NPC background. But for this Warcry anthology, they are the main characters.
Yeah, I mean, and all these warbands have units in the AOS world, and they're all like real, like 70 points for 8 or 9 dudes or whatever. Right? I haven't picked them apart, but like that includes your leader pieces, and they're like, oh man, all right. So it is fun to kind of see it on this smaller scale.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a story about farmers, like this is about as close as we're probably going to get to farmers in AOS. Because this is just the normal people.
So specifically, you mean like the leader of a warband would be like the unit champ for a battle line.
Wouldn't even be a hero.
Yeah. And I'll say, I mean, the Bloodwind Spoils has Blood Rain, but in these stories, there's a lot of things that the 8 points rains down.
Yeah. Raining Cats and Dogs. We didn't see it literally, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And then a wide range
Bone
of other
shards,
ways.
thorns.
Knives at one point, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
it's
Yeah.
so it's like it will throw everything at you. Kitchen sinks
Yeah.
as well.
Literally
gosh.
the kitchen sink.
Ouch, that would hurt.
Yep. Thunk.
Mine's like cast iron.
Unless you're an iron golem, then you just wear it as armor.
You say
Are you
sweet.
going to make that conversion now? Because I feel like you have to have that conversion.
That'd be
in your warband.
my ogre's name is just gonna be kitchen
Your
sink.
signifier is just holding a kitchen sink.
Sweet sink, dude. All right, let's talk some about the who's. We won't go too deep into it, but for each of these stories, and I think I said it before, they basically are following a representative or a character from each of those war bands, right? So if you've got one of your favorite 6 Chaos war bands, there's a story in here for you. So let's go down the line. So the first story is about the Unmade, and so we follow this blissful one named Grovskeen. Am I saying that right?
Gravskine.
Skine? Okay,
Grovskeen.
Skine. I don't know.
Yeah, that.
But this is a blissful one of
Graveskane?
the Unmade. Since there's a bunch of them, we won't go dig too deep in each one. But in the Cypher Lord story, there's Vignis Daneg. Why am I doing this? Vignis Dagnegia? He's a thrall master of the Cypher Lord. So that's the dude with like the bomb in his hand, like that little model. He's cool. There's Thornwinder, who's a brave of the Untamed Beasts. I don't know these units that well. Is a brave a thing? Is that a unit?
So he is would be a plains runner.
Okay.
Although in the story they talked about him earning the rank of Coursier, which I wonder if it was like a before, like one of those things in the writing of this that there was a bunch of different names they were floating around.
We get stuff like
A
that.
courser is often used in like parkour or free running, name used for somebody who just traverses their landscape.
Tell me what you know about free running or parkour.
I think everybody's had that rabbit hole on YouTube before, so
Okay.
Don't shame me for my
no
parkour-
shame. I was
my
just,
parkour rabbit
you
hole.
sounded like an expert, and I wanted to hear
2003.
more about it. There's
How many times did you go to the hospital?
I suppose it
Eric?
would have had to be more like 2011. Okay, fine.
there's Locke, who's a spire stalker of the Corvus Cabal. He's a cool bird dude. There's Merrick, who's, let's say, a chaos, without getting too specific, he's a chaos tribesman who ends up getting caught up with the group of Splintered Fang.
Like he was supposed to go over here, but through some means he went this way.
Yeah, I mean, life is always full of surprises, right? Especially in the Bloodwind Spoil. And then there's Vostalis, who's a Dominar of the Iron Golems. So most of these folks are, not all, but most of them are like the leader models of, or at least higher up in their respective war bands, but not always. So we do get sort of varying perspectives, not only from the war bands, but even from the different like hierarchies in the war bands themselves. Some cool stuff. Do you guys have any things you want to talk about when it comes to the people, the peeps?
Well, there is one overarching theme in all of these plots, which
Just
is
one.
that
Killing people.
they are all trying to get Archaon's attention.
Yeah.
They all have their own way of doing it, right? But the other thing, if you haven't actually looked at the Warcry book or seen the background, none of these are your typical Chaos tribesmen. They don't worship Nurgle, they don't worship Khorne, they don't worship Slaanesh. They worship something else.
Well, I would contest your characterization of typical chaos. Typical in the sense of like what we're used to thinking of, but I think this is establishing like how many different ways there can be chaos.
This is the new typical.
Or
Right,
put a
exactly.
different way, maybe there is no typical at all. There's no
There
such
it
thing
is.
as a typical.
Yep.
It's and as they've kind of shown with some in the early days of kind of learning about chaos or about like the Gore Chosen or something like that, where you get a more gray version or a more empathizable characters in the AOS lore. I think this is definitely just in a different way showing you the shades of gray or what that part of that path to chaos. It's not just like a switch that's turned, but it is in most cases a sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but a twist and turn and a series of choices that lead you to either your demise or the attention of your superior or becoming something special in it.
That actually leads to a very specific intentional point here. All of these people are implied to have been part of a civilization that existed when Sigmar was in the realms and part of this golden age. and all of these civilizations were left behind when Sigmar retreated. And each one of these civilizations has fallen to chaos in their own specific way.
Sure.
So these are not intended to be, I'm evil because I love evil and evil is terrible. It's more intended to be, I'm evil because good left, and this is all that was left behind. So this is what I had to do to survive.
I'm going to cut that evil speech you just gave right there and take it out of context and make it look real bad.
That's okay.
What was cool is, as you mentioned too, is that I think many of the stories, like you said, initiated a hierarchy. So whoever the main character was, it gave you some interesting dynamics to play with between them and either their superior or their the people who answered to them. And I would say there were some similarities of just that kind of survival. There's not a lot of camaraderie. It's a lot of, dog eat dog.
From the rain.
Yep. But there's some different variations of that. Some very extreme backstabbing to some glimpses of there still being humanity left in some of these characters or these tribes.
Yeah.
So it was
Well, I wonder if it was almost intentional or as part of the brief or something like that, where it was almost necessary that you needed to get some of that interaction between the different levels.
Yeah.
Because I think without fail, every single story had some element of that, up or down sort of relationship.
Because I mean, they do a great job, I think, of establishing kind of just in this 8 points, in this wheel of chaos, where do people stand? Where do they start? Where are they trying to go? And what are the steps in between?
Yeah, it's always a series of hierarchies with Archaon being at the very, very top.
Yep.
Well, and as you might be able to tell, because we are dealing with 6 different separate stories here, we're kind of dancing around, trying not to fill in the details.
Literally.
But I think we did a really good job of giving a summary of what you can expect from reading these stories, personally.
Thank you.
So
Nice of you.
I hope everyone else thinks that we did a good job.
I hope so. So I personally am impatient to get on with the spoilers and actually talk about the stories.
But first, we gotta say, just generally, our mini review, is this something we recommend for folks? Paul, since you were talking, keep going.
I do recommend it. There is some elements of horror in some of these stories. So be aware, even though it's not a Warhammer horror theme, that there are definitely some horror vibes in several of the stories.
It's pretty gnarly. Eric, you're our Warcry guy.
Me?
Yeah.
Warcry guy.
Thanks,
I like that.
guys. Thanks. I would like to thank my mom, my dad. Yeah, I think I would recommend it. It's been said before. Sometimes some of the best experiences in reading the writing is in these short bursts of information that just give you enough to kind of give you a feeling if you know what's going on or where your place is. But there's still some really cool moments that surprised me, and I'm always looking for to be surprised by the writing and the stories.
Since I'm asking, I'm going to go to Davey now.
Sure. I'm on record several times of saying that I think that Black Library fiction often shines when it's in the short story form. So
we get it.
Yeah.
If you agree,
I was quoting Davey without giving him credit. I apologize.
So I think this is a great way to take a look. I think it's good if you obviously are thinking about getting into the game Warcry or want to deepen your understanding what the warbands are that you're seeing on the table. But also if you're just kind of a casual observer, it's cool for increasing your knowledge of the overall Age of Sigmar universe, because it gives like kind of a ground level look at some things that we haven't seen. So
yeah,
I enjoyed it for all those reasons.
I liked it because it was to build off what you were just saying, informative, also about a space that we don't get to spend too much time on. Like it's an area, this all 8 points, it's kind of shrouded in mystery a little bit. Like we know some details and some of the layout, but generally this is one of the first times we ever really get a sense of what it's like to live there. I guess we just literally read Scourge of Fate not too long ago, but this sort of builds on that. So I do enjoy it for that aspect of it. Furthermore, the beauty of it being an anthology is you got 6 stories. If you don't like one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, chances are there's probably another one in there that you are going to like. I do find that there was honestly kind of a fair bit of variety even in the writing styles or the perspectives of the stories, and so it always kept me on my toes because there's always something new to learn about, especially despite the fact that we are still ostensibly in the same location. There is a wide range and wide variety of people's places and things. So I do recommend it from that perspective. And again, you can sort of pick and choose the parts you like, don't like, because it was a cool anthology.
And then one last point that David reminded me of is that this is straight up an introduction to all 6 of these factions. There is no information that you need before starting to read them. You will get everything that you need to know about them while you're reading the story. So if you are a little bit like, I don't know if I want to start reading some Age of Sigmar fiction because there's so much already been written, right? There's so much involved with each of these storylines. This is a great book for you to read because that's not true. It literally is starting from the beginning.
Cool. All right. Paul wants to talk about spoilers, and far be it for me to deprive him of that discussion.
Bloodwind spoilers.
Let's get out of town.
Oh, that could have been my intro.
Yeah.
But I went with my dumb devourer.
We didn't call it dumb. You said it.
Our silence said it.
All right, so the spoiler phase? It wasn't in italics. All right, cool. So now we can go hog wild. Cool. So I think what we'll do is maybe go story by story, just to keep it simple. We won't get too creative or fancy with it. We'll stick to what we know and love. So that means that we are going to start with The Harrower by David Annandale. And so this is the unmade story. And I'll dive right into it. All right, so the plot is as follows. So there's that Grovskeen that I was talking about before, the blissful one of the Unmade.
You know what? Pick a pronunciation and own it.
Yeah, that's true.
You got this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Steve has the goal of finding this tower, right? So they're part of this Unmade tribe. I'm sure it has a name, but I've forgotten it. And they have recently rolled up into the Bloodwind spoils from Shyish. They're on the hunt for this mythical, this tower that their whole warband is basically dedicated their lives to finding. So there's been past leaders of this Unmade group over the years, and they're said to have found it originally, but they've lost it. And so they've sort of repeatedly sent scouts and parties out to go find it. Because apparently it's this source of untold power made specifically for this Unmade warband. And so their goal is, from this perspective that we're following from Steve, to go find this tower and sort of claim their rightful place and the power that goes along with it. So we pick up, I think they're already in the Bloodwind spoils, and they're traversing across the desolate marches. Is that not part of the Bloodwind spoils?
It's confusing. This is one that tells its story by being in the present and then giving you flashbacks to different stages to see how they got there.
Yeah, they're in this desolate marches, and they're making their way to where they think this tower is. And so it's at this point we kind of get that interpersonal relationships amongst Grovskeen and her warband. She's got an ascended one. I don't know what the other units are called, but like these different sort of interactions with these other folks. There's her like right hand guy. I think it's the Skarask dude. Is that him? Who's kind of like constantly like being a Debbie Downer about the whole thing.
This guy fascinates me because of that. The ethos of the Unmade is that they put themselves through pain and suffering. That's how they reach, and they've already gone through like some pretty serious body mods to like receive that pain. And dude's whining about like walking too far, or like, hey,
he's basically like, oh, this doesn't hurt.
I forgot my snacks, or like it does seem like some of the things he's worried about, like at this point, like
least of his concerns.
But it's interesting that maybe the other side of that is that like when your life is pain, there's certain things that probably just frustrate you even more. You're like, I'm already walking 100 miles in these spikes, like that are literally pointed up into your body. I don't need to do more of this than I need to. But it's just that very level of faith, and this guy was definitely not like the antithesis of Graveskine in that she was all in, and it seemed like he was still kind of a lot of doubt, even though he'd gone as far as he's gone.
Sure. Well, and I wonder if part of that was, and this is maybe we'll jump into the flashback, is that they were kind of on equal footing for a while. They were at whatever their threshold was.
She even was trailing him because he had moved up to an ascended one. Is that what it is?
I think that's what the term is. But she sort of leapfrogs him because, and we found out in a little bit of a flashback as they're hanging out, Not while she's sleeping, because it turns out they can't sleep because their eyelids have been straight cut off. And I guess you can't sleep when you don't have eyelids. Is that true?
They really cut off their
Davey,
eyelids. They
you
cut
do
off their face.
healthcare stuff.
I think there's stories of like soldiers on the Eastern Front that got frostbite so bad that they like lost their eyelids and lips and stuff like that. So I assume
Could they sleep?
I mean, you could cover your eyes, right?
No, not sure.
So.
I actually know someone who can't close her right eyelid, and she can sleep, but if something is on, then her unconscious can watch it and like make it part of her dream. So it's not that she can't sleep, it's just that she is constantly receiving information, so her brain doesn't stop functioning like a normal person's brain would stop functioning, right?
Has she replaced any of her hands with sickles?
I was
No.
going to make that exact joke.
Yeah, but I did it first.
Damn it.
So that's
But is it a joke? Did she really?
So if we're
But
gonna
for real though,
no, unfortunately. If we're gonna go into this as if you don't know what's going on, we kind of maybe got to go into a little bit of what the unmade are.
I don't have to do anything.
So
but you said
the
you
unmade.
didn't need to know that going into the story.
Well, but as we're talking about the story, if we're going to explain the plot,
so-
this is kind of necessary.
So just talk about what happened. So he was already ascended.
So yeah,
What does that mean?
So ascended just means that you have received some honor, some furtherance in the path of pain. And this actually, to me, was the coolest like resonance of the background with the models. So they are from the realm of death, right? So they live on this little island of Tizlid. So if you are going to be fighting against death, what's the thing that's the most opposite from them? The thing that's most opposite from the dead is pain, because the dead cannot feel pain, right? And so the unmade embrace pain, physical, pure pain in every form, as a way of finding ascendance and finding,
Bliss, maybe.
bliss.
What
Exactly.
about joy? Do they find joy in
They
it?
do find joy. They
Okay,
find
cool.
ascension, So the warband for the unmade is made up of these people who have lost an arm, lost a leg, whatever.
Well, and to that
eventually-
point is that they go through the process of removing these things. So they remove, one of the first things they do is they remove their face.
Yep.
So that they are not known by this physical or, who they were. Their identity is partially gone. But then through some of their ascending, they get, you mentioned that they were leg and leg, but he may have gotten his legs removed first. And, part of that process is you might get prosthetics or blades in place of your hands or those sorts of things. And often that blade is pointing out as sharp, but there's also a piece of metal pointing in that's poking into tendons and etc. So it's every bit of it, their ascending is about receiving more pain. So
No,
Davey,
no.
one of the things that you like talking about is the subversion expectation. And that was happening in spades here, where we're talking in the future and we have this flashback, and Grauskane ends up having her leg cut off, right? And so normally this would be like, oh, well, I guess this character's done. No, that was the beginning of her ascension to becoming a blissful one, right? Embracing that pain. And that is actually what led her to becoming the leader of this warband that is all about her. And the thing about her character is that she has these visions telling her what to do, and the visions are directing her to go to this Tower of Revels. And the warband has been assigned to her by the other blissful ones. So she is the latest induction into the blissful ones by these 5 or 6 other blissful ones that ritually cut off her legs and her arms and replace them with spikes and etc. So it very much is a completely different way of looking at chaos and a different way of experiencing how to survive in the mortal realms, for sure.
So they have this cool battle, and this is that flashback where they're fighting against a vampire lord and a bunch of undead stuff, and they very much characterize them kind of going in full bore, ninja run, slicing, dicing, fighting, etc. And it's in killing this vampire. So this is where she kind of leapfrogs this other guy,
which is tough because she just had her leg chewed off by a dire wolf.
Yep,
so
scratch.
leapfrog gets difficult.
and there's this It's hopscotch with one leg. And so she ends up killing this vampire, which gives her that kind of is deemed worthy by her peers to become that blissful one. The skull of that vampire then is mounted above her head as is part of the model, and as the kind of trophy of her.
Yeah, if you're wondering, the blissful one is the tallest of the unmade models.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 limbs are replaced and has his wackadoo.
And then a circlet of iron implanted into her skull, and then 4 poles that raise up and mount the skull within those 4 poles. Right? So there's a cut in the cloth of the miniature itself, and that's where her eyes are.
Yep.
Gross.
Yeah.
So what does this newfound power get her? Or like...
Well, this is kind of what I think I still, as big as we know the mortal realms are, I still try and think of like the experience of any one of these like characters is like 1,000 square miles or 100 square miles. Like you think back in the day, you didn't travel, thousands of miles. Your experience was smaller than what the mortal realms are. And so this tower is a part of their mythos. And it's this thing that's kind of just keeps appearing in her dreams, how she's going to get it, where she's going to go, where she's going to lead people. And so, this might be just this one tower in their experience. Nobody else in the 8 points has ever heard of it. It's not the most important thing in the world.
Right.
It's just this thing that's important to their tribe.
Right. The stakes are high for this tribe, but it's not. It was cool because they made stakes that these characters care about, and we kind of care about by proxy, but it doesn't have to be the fate of the entire realm of Shaman.
It's not a realm beast.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it was still engaging.
Yep.
Right. What I enjoyed was that her visions that she was already having early on, it seemed like she would get these possibly prophetic dreams. Now they've been enhanced by her new state. She gets them, or she believes more fully in them, and she's being trusted to lead her war band based on these. But I like the ambiguity of like, are these actual visions, or are they just like, I can't sleep, and so like I'm getting hallucinations and stuff from being so like, tripped out on pain and exhaustion and all that sort of thing. So
sure, cutting your arms and legs off doesn't put you in the best like mental state.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they in all of these stories play with that idea: is this my delusions of grandeur, or is this the intervention of lowercase g god, or a big god, whatever.
Yeah. So in this story, they go through a realm gate and they're following these visions, and they come to this wasteland, and Skarask, is very doubting as to, is this what we're supposed to be doing? Is this what's going on? And they keep walking, and they're losing people, and losing this person, and losing that person.
And then they're eating that person.
Oh, yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta eat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mom always said you gotta eat.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in like not only a featureless desert, but a featureless desert that is like shrouded in mists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so navigation difficulty, nightmare level,
I think they're going in circles, not sure if they're making it.
And eventually they find this river, this like molten river. It's not water, it's something else.
It's got a weird shimmer to it, if I remember correctly.
And so Gravskane is like, it's not water, we can't drink from it. Before eventually she decides that this is exactly what she needs to do. And so she drinks from this river, which of course Skarask is like, we really shouldn't be doing this. Keeps moving on, and eventually come to this settlement. There is an actual place. And now they have to come to this decision, right? What are they going to be doing? Are they going to keep going, or are they going to keep turning around?
Well, and at this point where they meet the river, she, in her vision, she sees this danger and again this pain, and she continuously moves into the pain, which is rewarding. And so when they get this river and it's poisonous, everyone knows it's poisonous. And is at this point in the river, or is later when they're like near a fountain?
I think this is the actual.
She takes a drink.
Yeah.
And she imbibes the poison directly into her, and then through her will and holding onto the pain survives, but it gives her another vision of where to go next.
Well, and she has this like connection with poison, right? Because it was the poison that was also part of her like ascension to the blissful one. So when she fought off that vampire, she'd actually get bit by the dire wolf,
and that had a
and
poison.
Then they also had a poison too. So she has this sort of like give and
So
take
would you
with the poison.
say this is her iocane powder moment? she's built up an immunity to it.
I don't think I can pronounce that word, so no, I would not say it.
Okay.
But so she drinks in this fountain, leads them onwards, and they end up in an ambush with a splintered fang
You're going
warband.
to skip over the carnivorous grass, man? How could you?
Well, that's another theme of this is that plants are out to get you here in the
The environment is out to get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, they're kind of moving up to this kind of crest, and the grass this tall grass, they kind of wade into it, and it starts attacking them. And there's just a moment where she's up on stilts, these metal stilts that spike into her legs. She's got these scythes for hands.
I say, fortunately, she's basically a living lawnmower. So.
Yeah, and so she just starts dancing and twirling, and there's what's the
That's
term?
why I wanted to bring it up, because I wanted to make the lawnmower joke.
Grass gains scissor hands. I get it.
So she's just in a trance, in a state. She gets into her dance, and she just moves, and she scythes it all down, not before losing probably a few people, and then moving on. And then they come upon markings of their brethren who had passed this way before. So again, she's not the first to come searching for this Tower of Revels. She's just the latest in a line to receive the visions and get permission to go forwards. And she's found kind of where the last kind of people had fallen, and they realize that there's a trap ahead of them that's been laid. And Skarask goes, "It's a trap. Why would we even go here?" And she goes, "No, we know it's a trap, which is why it won't work.
Yeah.
And we're going into, it's not a trap, it's an invitation. So it's a challenge from another warband. They go in.
A little bit of chaos doublethink.
Yeah. So, to move us forward, they go through and they fight some splintered fang, and they know, so this poison in the water, splinter fang, it's all part of that theme. It leads her to where the tower is. By this time, more of her people have cut down. They kind of fewer and fewer as they get there. And in the end, towards the end, it's her and Skarask, right?
Right. And they're charging at this tower, and there's Splinter Fang archers up on it, raining down poison arrows at them. I was like, there's no way we're going to make it. And they've been following the river. That was part of our vision, following this river, which is leading them directly to the Tower of Revels, which is their goal. And she's like, at first she gives some kind of like, hey, we can do this. Like, we just believe hard enough. And
to his credit, he follows along.
He
charges too.
Yeah. Because they found it. Like, I mean, this is a big deal. Like, It feels like, hey, this is the first time anyone's done this. Sure sucks that Splintered Fang is already here, but let's go kick him out. So they're charging in, realize like, actually, like, we're not going to make it. And then she has this revelation, like, oh, I just got to embrace the pain. So she dives into this river and convinces Skarask to jump in. And then she's swimming in this like poisonous river of pain and goes right into the inside of the tower. So like,
and it's, I mean, to that point where he believes now, he does follow her, and she can't swim because she's got metal hands
and running along the bottom.
So she's like jumping and clawing, like, and holding her breath in this poison.
Listeners, you can't see Eric's pantomime, but it's
I look like a danger sloth, a war sloth.
I prefer danger sloth.
But they make it in, and they're obviously, so it seems like the archers on the wall and everyone who is guarding it think that they're dead and dumb for diving into the water, because there's no alarms. Nobody meets them inside. There's a pretty terrific kind of, so Skarask is mortally wounded. They both ingest the poison. She survives it better than he does.
Sure.
She kind of,
there's a moment of like almost tenderness where she's like, oh, I'm going to lift you up. You're so weakened. And she's got to use her like crazy scythe hands to like, I'm going to lift you gently so as not to accidentally cut your arms off and then put you down.
Yep. And so she goes to the end game.
Can't go up the ladder because guess what? when you're walking around on knife stilts, it's pretty tough.
But they find this an interesting mechanism with the tower where the poison is almost like, so there's a main water flow, and this poison is one aspect of it, and she sees where that source of the poison is. And what she sees is that there's actually like some of the water being dammed up or kept from flowing, and so the poison is more potent than it should be. and she goes up and she fights the bad guys. There's this epic end battle of those that are inside it. She opens the dam. It dilutes the poison, and so the idea there is that there's enough poison to cause pain to everything that the water feeds down the road, but it doesn't kill them. So there's another theme of like the unmade want pain without death, whereas the Splintered Fang want to poison things to death. And she's the only one left standing.
On knife stilts.
Yep. but the tower is hers. She's taken it. And then she hears kind of war horns and realizes that outside a different warband, not the Splintered Fang, but something else, some other warband has come to challenge and take the tower, and realizing that the tower isn't just for her.
Right. She thinks back because these mechanisms, there were other mechanisms that she didn't use. It looks like, I mean, it almost feels like, you see some video games like, if I move this lever and combine these in this way. So it feels like there's these combinations of ways you can combine some of the different inputs for this river to make it amenable to particular warbands.
Yeah. I mean, it literally felt like you're playing King of the Hill. She's like, I got King of the Hill. Oh, crap. I'm not going to keep it for very long. The story ends.
We're gonna have to take points on whether this is a board game coming out sometime or a battle plan. But yeah, like if you control it, the tower behaves the way that is true to your kind of beliefs.
And it kind of gives the realization that the Tower Revels is not a one-time thing. Like they've probably been searching for this. It's just an eternal quest.
Yep.
Because you find it, you're going to lose it, and then you'll have the quest again.
Yeah.
The journey is the quest.
It's the friends she made along the way.
The skein she made along the way. Okay. But there's a futility in it. That is survival of the fittest, but at the end of the day, the fittest still might not be enough.
Yeah. Pyrrhic victory.
Yep.
Stay tuned to that channel.
It's another podcast we're making.
So yeah, that sums up the story in a nutshell. Are there any interesting takeaways that you guys got from this? One thing that I right out of the gate sort of realized at the end of this story is like we're talking about like sort of the futility of like chaos as a whole, or like even living in this area. You bring up Pyrrhic victories is going to start being a theme. I feel like sort of the futility of like actions is going to be a theme of this anthology as well. That like. It's constant turnover. It's constant toil, and there's you're never in a safe spot. Like you're never where you want to be. There's always a bigger fish. There's always somebody who's there to take stuff away from you. And like I don't know, it's hard to even acknowledge the fact that I was sympathizing with this character because she's such like a horrid like monster creature, and yet when like she realized that. Like she got her goal, but then she immediately dawned on her she wasn't gonna be able to keep it. Like it dawned on me, and it made me sad. Like, which I am not cut out to live in the Bloodlands Spoil. Is what I'm getting at, I suppose.
I do think it's probably you're better off if you're only 1 foot in to chaos or 1 foot into some of this. Like think of all those
no feet in.
Or no. Well, you think about all those other blissful ones that are like judging whether or not she should be blissful and could go, whereas they're just chilling and they got some pain, but they're not all in. Right? They're chilling back on the other side of a realm gate. Whereas like she's all in, and it is like the worst. Like you get to experience these highs, but at the end of it is there's just no future.
It's like if you're not Archaon.
But
you're not going to come out on top.
If you were in a pain cult, would you want it to be short and sweet?
Yes.
Or long and enduring?
The only thing I'd say is that kind of drove home that there's a little bit of a Slaanesh vibe to these Unmade, right? So like the extremes of pain, embracing that. She's a dancer at one point. The tower is called the Tower Revels. So there's none of these warbands we've already talked about, none of these warbands are dedicated to a particular god, but they're worshipping chaos in an aspect, and that may be, one of the 4 main chaos gods may come to the forefront as part of their particular aspect that they're looking at, without even necessarily naming it.
Or being a member of some of these warbands may be sort of an introduction to like a chaos god proper. I wonder if that'll come up later.
Totes and goats.
I think I enjoyed quite a bit that it took a really unpalatable topic, right? Like the background of the warband itself is not like
Flaying one's body.
Flaying one's face off of your skull and then mounting on your belt buckle. But at the end, it was a sympathetic character, right? Like, you wanted her to succeed. And I
don't know why.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, that's some really good writing, right? Where you take something that is just not at all what you want to read about, but you have a character that you care about. And I think he did a good job of doing that, so.
I wonder if Skarask had something to do with that, actually. The fact that he was always sort of like naysaying, I wonder if that sort of...
And you were like, hey, Skarask, you're an idiot. I know
hate him worse so that you like her a little more?
I wonder if that was like, I don't know, intentional. Like, yeah. Any other thoughts about Harrow, or do we want to talk just what do you guys think? Just real quick review.
It was the first one I read, and I liked kind of ripping the Band-Aid off with these unmade, and getting kind of that gross. Okay, I can stomach that. I can stomach the rest of it.
Yeah,
and it was just a cool kind of straightforward arc.
Yep, I read the Iron Promise first because it came out as an e-short before that, but so I read this second. I might have read it before. You might have already been started. I don't know. I remember sending out a warning to the rest of the group. It was like, hey, y'all, heads up. Like, this gets pretty intense pretty fast. Like, this prologue opens with her being like, I couldn't sleep because I didn't have eyelids. Well, actually, I still had them, but they were on my belt instead of my face. And I was like, oh, my God. But yeah, I think it was a little startling. And I don't know. I didn't. There was something unexpected about it, and like Paul was saying, I appreciate that. So it made me eager to read more.
I enjoyed it. It was the last one I read, but I think he did a really good job of matching the miniatures to the tone. I really liked the theme of embracing pain as a way of not embracing death. I thought that was a really cool and clear contrast that he made. So it was definitely uncomfortable at points, but
sure.
Points. Get it?
That was fun. She had points on her. I liked it. I think it was well written, and I think it was one of the trippiest of the stories as well. So it was like horrifying, but also even the setting and the places that we went, it was very like abstract at times, which was, I mean, the flashback contributed to that, like the weird desolate waste where there was no like features or anything. The tower itself is kind of like out there a little bit. Some of the other stories are a little bit more grounded, and this stood out as a wild, wacky trip.
Was any of it real?
Like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, right? Like, this doesn't make sense, but you have to accept it because that's where the story is going and that's what the character believes, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. So you get some of that, elsewhere as well, but I feel like it was very hyper, localized in this story. But because it was so different, if you were looking for a change of pace, I feel like we always talk about like getting a different perspective on things in our Black Library fiction. I think this is an example of that. So I recommend checking it out. Let's go to the next one. We've got Method of Madness by Peter McLean. This is the Cypher Lords story. We're following, I talked about him before, Vignis Danagia, who he and his warband are rolling up on the city of Carne Grad, which we had mentioned before. It's that city in the Bloodwind Spoil. And Vignis, he's got big plans. He's got high aspirations. He's after power, and he will do anything to get it. And by do anything, I mean make his followers do anything to get it, basically. Not to say he doesn't get his hands dirty, but he does. So we're first introduced to him and his warband. They, I think, are just initially arriving on Carne Grad and butchering everyone they see. Like, he's riding a palanquin, and he's sending his mirror blades to dice dudes up. Paul wants to say
this is an awesome palanquin. This is my favorite introduction of all the short stories.
Describe it to me. I couldn't get a picture of what it was.
So basically, I mean, if you imagine Xerxes in 300, right? He has this huge set of stairs carried by these many slaves, right? Like, that is who this character is. He is in this huge palatial thing that is carried by 6 or 7 of his slaves. It is so big that he has a throne, and then he has 2 pits to either side that are 8 feet deep. And they each have, one of them has his second in command inside of it, and the other one has this, like, basically sniveling little guy who is providing directions, right? So it's like he's driving a semi through Age of Sigmar. This is how big this vehicle is. And he is in absolute and complete control of every character in his warband, right? Like, as opposed to where we just read with the Blissful One being like, no, I need to convince you that my visions are true. The Cypher Lord is in specific drug-addled addiction worship from every one of his members, and is introduced as an absolute and complete leader.
Authoritarian.
Yeah.
And a real nice guy.
But this palanquin is too big for the road, so they
Yeah.
go in and just start trashing houses and hovels on the way through.
One of his mirror blades comes up. He's like, "Oh, it's not going to fit. We'll make it fit."
Yeah.
And this was kind of gnarly because right off the bat they talk about the palanquin ground forward into the widened thoroughfares. All around them, families burned unmoored in their demolished hovels. It's like, oof, like
I've got one of those.
yeah. So a lot of
A
times,
hovel
like
or a family?
we when we're talking about these, everyone that is interacted with is like of fighting age or is a fighting person. Certainly, especially when we think about chaos, like we only ever see the warriors and stuff, but there's people are born, maybe don't grow old, but are born and die here in the Bloodwind Spoils. And this is kind of a reminder that at some point, everyone's a kid apparently. So that's a little rough, even in the context. And it was just like a throwaway line, but.
Yeah.
Just because you're on the same Grand Alliance does not mean that you have any friends there.
Well, one of the other things is that he is definitely introduced, the main character is introduced as this very high-cultured, very intelligent person, and then he rocks up to the walls of the city. So like, okay, this is all right, we're going to have a discussion, he's going to negotiate. It's like, no, he's just going to throw bombs, make everybody go freaking crazy, and just break down the doors. Like, and again, it's the negation of expectation here where you're like, this is somebody who's going to be an envoy. No, he comes in as a destroyer.
Now, that's interesting because the Cypher Lords, the way they're often described, is a very like behind-the-scenes, political manipulating kind of thing. So I do get the side of this where he is in complete control through manipulation or drugs or whatever of his warband, but it seems very aggressive and straightforward.
It's an aggressive start, but he switches into the more typical, more expected Cypher
Yeah, I was
Lord.
going to say he slides into that pretty quickly.
Tell me more.
So they make ingress into the city, and eventually they realize that like we can't keep going this route because the palanquin's too big and the roads are too narrow. So some of the scouts locate a nearby armory where they're going to set up shop. They're going to drop the palanquin off and sort of use that as a base of operations. And so they do that. So they roll on over. I think by the time he gets there, his followers have already like crucified the armor smith who owns the thing. And then at one point he pulls him down and gets information from him, and then I think takes one of his blacksmith's hammers and crushes his head with it. Himself, no less, right? Like he does it.
Yeah.
So he's not like this feeble.
No.
Like he's got some martial prowess as well, in addition to his bombs, because I think he blows up that advisor that he sort of had coerced into his. So he's already got like 2 deaths, like 3 pages in, like under his belt. So he's also pretty capable.
One of the other things is that, just to be clear, when I said that like these are drug addled, right? Like he is flat out 100% a drug dealer, and everyone in his warband is addicted to his drugs, right? That is why they believe in him. It gives him powers over them and it allows him to have this like psychic link.
Calls him mind-bound. Right?
Exactly. It calls it mind-bound, but like they are literally afraid of doing him harm and not listening, and they will suffer physical pain. And
Just like us and our listeners.
Exactly. And then they also have these little eye things that he can put somewhere and watch what's going on. So he starts planting these around the city.
Is that part of the game?
Yeah.
I don't think there's any items.
It's referenced. I don't know if there's any items. And so he hides a palanquin in some other building, but he takes this huge cargo and brings it into the armory and starts dealing with the local politicians, right, basically. So he finds out that there are these 8 lords of Carne Grad.
Talon lords, right?
Yep. And this is where this story really embraces the civilization of chaos, right? So they are basically all slumlords. They get to power because they're strong enough, they're big enough.
And gosh darn it, people like them.
Exactly. And so Denegia finds that there is this one slave master who seems to be in control of the area where he is in, because this is the poorest, most ignored part of Carne Grad, which is why he chose to locate his base there. And so he goes and grabs this slave master and is like, I want you to go talk to this Talon Lord because I want to start making this deal with him.
And by goes and grabs, he sends his mirror blades, who are basically ninja assassins, breaks into a building where like they're in the middle of a deal. It turns out this slave owner guy was like already had a target on his back from a bunch of other people in the city. So it's almost as if our Cypher dude ends up saving him from like this fate, but then of course enacts a worse fate on him. And all the while his mirror blades are sort of fanning throughout the city and fighting off like these roof runners, which are basically, whether they're like ruffians or they end up being like Corvus Cabal like folks. Like it's kind of a mix, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyways, he extracts this local slumlord. In order to try to coerce him or use him to get an in with the local like hierarchy of chaos.
And so he starts feeding drugs to this guy, right? Like, and
he's got to start by getting. You're talking about one of the 7 talons, right?
No, this is actually the slave master. He starts giving him drugs for information.
Yeah, I don't think this guy's.
And then he mixes up this like potion, this alchemical mixture. So he gives it to this guy, and then the guy's face literally comes off of his skull. It's like we're in another Unmade story here, but instead of ritually flaying the face off, there's little things inside the mixture that actually pull off the face. And then this main character, Denegia, takes off his mask and puts this man's face on over his own.
Why can't anyone keep their face on?
I don't know. Place? It's a face-off.
Oh, get out of here.
Face facts.
I won't.
So
careful, you end up with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta up in the
Sure, and then the Dwellers Below are going to copyright infringe us.
TM.
Yeah.
So as he takes off his helmet, this is the first time that we've known that this is actually a sense of his power, right? Like, he cannot take off his helmet in front of his followers without permission. This is a part of his power. But he can force his followers to take off their masks. And it is something that really, like, it basically treats them as slaves instead of his followers.
They're not supposed to be able to see his unmasked face.
Exactly. So he puts on this other man's face over his, and then goes into this fortress of one of the Talon Lords with his unmasked people. And he brings an offering of this specific wine. The fire wine that is made by his people that live in the land of Hish. And turns out this slave master wasn't as well respected by the Talon Lord as he thought. And so they just steal...
Which good, right? Like, I don't want anybody like that getting any sort of...
Right, exactly. Because the guy that we're talking about, he's totally a great guy and you want to root for him. So he gives this flask of fire wine and they just take it instead of paying him for it. But he's like, you know what? They got it. They're going to give it to their lord. It's fine. So, of course, this flask is full of fire wine, but also this alchemical mixture that is a poison and makes the lord start going flippin' crazy.
And also, like, turbo addicted to it as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it affects his mood and his, like, his mental state, but then he gets, like, mega hooked on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come crawling, back to our guy, saying, hey, man, we gotta get more of that fire wine.
Yeah.
Because he's probably going to kill us if we don't.
Yeah.
This being the Talon Lord that he was trying to get in with.
So the Talon Lord itself evidently is a position that is very much based on the power of the person, right? And so it's not even that he's necessarily intelligent, but just that he is the face of the power. And no matter what's going on with him, doesn't matter. If they lose him, they lose everything, right? So he starts extracting money, starts planting these eyes in the palace itself, and just keeps getting the Talon Lord more and more addicted as a way of gaining political power and gaining favors, right? He becomes somebody that is somewhat powerful within this place.
I kind of forget how it ends.
Oh, that was the worst part.
Skip through. There's one point where he's kind of overplayed his hand a little bit, and they say, "Well, how do we know it's not poison?" He says, "Oh, of course it's not poison." Well, you drink some, and he's like, "Ooh, boy, that is some gnarly stuff, but I guess I'm gonna drink it.
Yeah.
So he takes a drink and then has to like, walk really quickly home afterwards, but like be cool, and like gets home and is like starting to totally freak out and have all these hallucinations and try and cook himself up an antidote in time. It's the one point where the plan nearly comes to pieces. Yeah. There's some cool skirmishes along the way with the Corvus Cabal.
Yep.
Most of these mirror blades fighting them. Some of them get strung up and all that sort of thing. They were some of the one-on-one fights I really enjoyed. Like I was like, ooh, I'm not sure who's going to win in this. And it was a cool duality.
Those two warbands are sort of, I'll say, evenly matched in that like they kind of do similar things, right? They're all speed, agility, like and not even just in combat, but even off the battlefield, in that they both want to be like spy master behind the scenes type people. So all in all, they serve as, I don't know, maybe good foils for each other. I don't know if I'm using that word right, but so I think that they're perfectly paired in this story to be sort of at each other's throats.
Yeah.
But how does it end?
So eventually the face itself dies, and he has to introduce himself as himself, and it's his envoy. And
introduce myself.
Yeah, exactly. And so it ends with the Denegia walking into the throne room, and the throne lord is just raving mad, and he brings in another barrel of fire wine, and the throne lord is talking about this lady.
Talon Lord.
The Talon Lord, thank you. The Talon Lord is talking about this lady that is giving him orders, and this lady is like the most disgusting, nurglified attempt at beauty that you can imagine. And it's an hallucination that the Throne Lord is having.
Also a figment of his imagination.
Yeah. Well, but it's not actually a figment, because Denegia is allowed to, has the power to manipulate this manifestation and talk to the Throne Lord and basically tell him whatever he wants. And as everyone else starts drinking the fire wine, he has poisoned it to the hilt, and everybody just goes flipping crazy. And so basically the whole throne room just devolves into like a gelatinous mess of death and horror. It's disgusting.
Yum. So you're saying drinks and a feast?
Delish.
Yeah.
So he gets what he wants, right? Like because of that, he's able to like sort of usurp that power structure.
Wines and dines them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then sends his army to go out and kill the rest of the Corvus Cabal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's the first thing I do.
Poison the whole district.
Sure.
Pour this in. That's the just so total chaos.
Yeah, that's the end goal. So like it also throughout the story they talk about how like they have their bombs and they'll like fumigate whole like buildings and stuff and drive like those whole areas like mad. So like that is his MO. And he does it well. That's basically it. That went way faster than the first one. Great, awesome, cool. So what are some takeaways? What are some fun things that you guys enjoyed about this story?
The battles were awesome. It was super cool.
Lightning quick, yeah.
Yep.
I really liked my gal, Samili Kalkis, who is his main mirror blade. Mm-hmm. And so she's got this great relationship with these two under mirror blades. Like she sort of treats them like she's like a mother.
Call her mother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's got a mother, I don't know if they're both sons, relationship with these other two mirror blades. And so like she loses one through the story. He gets strung up in a tree. And so like that really hurts her, but like she's been in the, I don't want to say employee because she definitely doesn't get paid, service of our thrall master.
The thrall.
Yeah, exactly. Since she was like, 3 years old or something like that. So he's had her for a long time. And just sort of, it gets in her brain a little bit. She's even a point of view once or twice in this story. And it sort of gets into the mind of somebody who could be so like hopelessly devoted to, this thrall master. Plus she's just a BA on the battlefield. Mm-hmm. At one point she gets like pretty wrecked, but she takes a, where does it come from? She has it in a pouch or something. She takes a drug that makes her like super like amped up, and so she's able to like get out of a really hairy situation. But like then she comes
starts
down,
wearing off.
Yeah, comes down hard right when like she needs it the most or something like that. So like she takes her licks as well as she gives them. So I think she's a highlight for me.
Yeah, she was the most endearing character in this story. If there was an endearing character,
it hinted / outlined some of her history, how she came to be. in the employ, and it was pretty gnarly. It sounds like she went through some awful stuff at a very young age.
Oh, yeah. When they always talk about all the pain that she goes through in this story, she's like, well, compared to what I've been through, like this is almost nothing.
NBD.
Yeah. So as opposed to the Unmade, where they're embracing pain and voluntarily taking on this pain, right? The Cypher Lords are about causing pain and about causing addiction, right? Like if this story says anything, it's literally just drug lord rolls into town and gets everyone addicted and just rolls over everything and kills everybody in this way.
Yeah, and inflicting madness as well.
Yeah.
And because of that, kind of makes you wonder if maybe there's a leaning towards a little bit of a Zinch, especially with like the plots and the plans and the craziness and the madness. I think we've got a Zinch leaning.
Alchemy is as close as we get to sorcery for a big.
Yeah. Agreed. Any other thoughts before we go to the next one? No, I guess we got to review it.
Oh, sure. I'll start. Yeah. I enjoyed that we got to see Carne Grad. That was cool. So I recommend it for that. I will say, Calcis rooted for her a little bit. I was actively rooting against the main dude for a lot. And mostly because he rolled in like super arrogant, like here I am because of who I am. I'm just going to own this place. I was like, man, I want this guy to get his comeuppance. Like, that's kind of like one of my pet peeves. I see someone who's like arrogant. I want to see them get taken down a peg. And he didn't really. So I was like, oh, man.
It's almost rare that you see someone with that arrogance and not have a fall towards the end.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought it was setting up. I was like, ooh, it's going to be delicious when it happens. Then it didn't.
Never did. Yeah. At one point, they say something like, my lord, I'm afraid these people don't know who you are. And then he's like, can you imagine living in such ignorance?
Yeah.
Not a direct quote, but close enough.
Yeah. I enjoyed some aspects of the story, but I had a real hard time with the hallucination and the description. There was a lot of gore. There was a lot of addiction too. Like there was a lot of very mental descriptions of things that were going on. They're very visceral.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a lot of horrible stuff in the Unmade story, but generally they were choosing to inflict it upon themselves, and here it was being forced on other people.
Exactly. And that was harder for me. So I did finish it. But
sure. It's okay if you take off your face, but if you take off somebody else's face, then you've got a problem.
Then you're a bad man.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I liked it as well. It might have even ranked pretty high as one of my favorite stories in this anthology. I liked the urban setting. I liked chaos in a city of chaos sort of thing. Chaos up against chaos, which was kind of neat. Although it was incredibly violent and there was a lot of fights going on, it wasn't always about the fight, which I think some of these other stories end up being. Like, it's not just purely blades on blades type stuff. Sometimes you throw bombs in windows and make people go nuts. So it's a little different in that regard. I feel like we go back to that different aspect quite a bit. It was neat. Like I said, it was kind of Zinchian, which is sort of stands out again in this Warcry setting. So yeah, it was cool. Next one.
I like this one.
Oh, this one's called The Devourer's Demand by Ben Counter. See, that's an easy name to say. Good job, Ben.
If only he was a character.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce the main character's name?
Thornwinder.
Hey, nice one.
Thank you.
Is it not Thornwinder?
Eric,
nope.
Eric, tell me about Thornwinder. Start us off.
Yeah, so this was this is Untamed Beasts, and they've also recently come through a Realm Gate and kind of a select war band.
Realm Gate from where?
From Gur.
Thank you.
And it comes from the perspective primarily of a Planesrunner, which is one of their kind of lowliest. And these are the very kind of carnal, use bone weapons and live off the land. They're very much about how the land provides. Obviously, when you're coming from Gur, and the land of Gur is often characterized as being having animalistic tendencies, devouring things, eating things.
I wouldn't want to live off of that land.
Nope. So they very much, their version of a chaos deity is the land, the devourer. Very much, you think about like the maw from the ogres, or, those sorts of things that eat. And so they come through the Realm Gate, they kind of have one of these first fights, and this Planesrunner is kind of just, again, this weakling, scrawny. They're small. They're not built like the Heart Eaters, which are these Conan the Barbarian sized, swollen with chaos kind of guys. And they get into this battle, and early on, the beast speaker of the tribe calls, sees, I'll put it this way, Thornwinder kills somebody. And the beast speaker calls out and sees that he did this. And he calls to everybody else and he goes, look, the whelp killed something. If you haven't blooded anything yet, even the whelp has done it.
Yeah.
And so he really uses him to shame the rest of the tribe into action, and he really takes offense at
Are you
this.
saying the shaman with shaman people?
Yeah. And so they get further into the battle, and he identifies the leader of this warband. And I think this is a place we were talking about, Davey. This is supposed to be an unmade warband, but the descriptions of the unmade here aren't as crystallized as they are in the game and as in the first story. And so this may have been written before some of these concepts were as solid as they are now.
Mm-hmm.
The leader of the unmade is a rotund or very large individual, which very well could be a blissful one, and who's larger and not just skin and bones and flay. But they don't mention the flay, and they think they talk about flails and that sort of stuff.
I wonder if every unmade warband isn't the same, though, right?
Right. And I think that's interesting here too. And when you give the authors room to kind of describe and write, because they talk about some of the other characters in the Unmade Beasts as having bows and arrows and those sorts of things. So they're very tribesmen. Mm-hmm. They're using a lot of those tropes. So there's a leader. He identifies it, this leader, and he goes after the leader. And there's a moment here where he feels the devourer calling to him. And again, kind of the same way that Graveskin kind of goes towards the pain. He goes towards the challenge, the biggest, strongest thing, and feels rewarded by the earth. And feels like the earth is lifting him up, and and this is one of those points where and this is one of the points where I think you could argue: is it, or is this in his mind, or did this actually happen? Now it just says he's coming down on the guy, but again, it's his perspective. So he's coming down on the leader, and the leader catches him, or there's a battle. He ends up finding the strength and the will and the strength of the devourer, and he kills the leader.
I think at one point he drops his knife into his other hand, and
an Arya Stark.
Stabs him.
There's his first blow that's going to be the killing blow is blocked by the warlord, who holds up his hand and just gets his arm chopped like halfway through his forearm, just splits it all the way down. The warlord keeps rolling after that because he's unmade.
He's like, I'm into this. Yeah, thank you. I was going to do that later, actually.
Thank you. Yeah.
But this is a turning point for him, especially for his tribe, because he then takes the head, carries it around while everyone's kind of like burning the bodies and sitting down for a meal, etc. It's like he's just holding on this trophy, almost like making sure that everybody in the tribe sees that he's the one who killed it.
Did you see what I did? Did you see this? Head that I got? Yeah.
Yep. And I think the Heartrender actually gives it to him or awards it to him or whatever, basically. But there's a moment he has a conversation with the shaman of the tribe, or I'm trying to think what the name of his position.
Speaker, I think you called it.
So it could be, but this was almost like an elder of the tribe, and I don't know if he's a beast speaker. Again, it could have been intended to be a beast speaker, but some of the language. And he asks him, "What are you here for? Like, why did you come through the gate? Like, you're the smallest dude here. Why did you come?" And he gives kind of a little bit of a speech saying that, we'd conquered everything over there. Everything was ours. So there was nothing for me to do, nothing for me to lend myself to there. So we came here because the great devourer deserves all the rest of this. And they kind of start talking about the mantra. The mantra is to tear things down. And he even asks them, and this was kind of cool, but isn't the Varenspire like a civilization or a structure? If you're here to tear things down, what about the Varenspire? And he says, well, after we've teared down everything else held by order or man or whatever, then we'll take down the Varenspire too. So like there's, I love this aspect, and maybe that's why I'm drawn to this warband, is that this idea of like, again, everything needs to go. Even Archeon's tower needs to fall. And there's just, there's just like an unbelievable like delusion of grandeur in this.
And don't you get the impression that like if Archeon rolled up and asked them, they'd be like, "Yeah, no, we'll tell you. Yeah, I'll tell you to your face. We're gonna tear that mother down." Like,
yeah. So, well, and I mean, there's a side to it too. Like, did Archeon tell everybody to build this thing, or did they just build it? Archeon doesn't live there.
He doesn't hang out.
Like, but so this was definitely a turning point. He gets some credibility. He becomes what they call a courtier or a plains runner. He gets that's his first position of power. And this was cool in this book where then it fast forwards sometime, maybe a year. And it sees him on a hunt. And he is tracked to this thing called the Harrow to a part of a hunting ground or whatever. And this is where they talk about how the earth is trying, like the land is trying to eat them. Like there's plants, there's like flowers that are trying to like chomp on a foot, that sort of stuff. And he describes this beast as being kind of this dragon type thing, this scaly, large beast.
A gore drake
is it a gore? Yeah, so dragonish, and it's constantly bleeding out of its scales like gills, and it's this weird like, why is it doing that? Come to find out that that's its way it lures people to it, thinking that it's wounded. So I'll follow this blood trail, and then it ends up like being tracked, and then it knows when it's being tracked, and then it traps its tracker. So it turns on him. And so he has this delusion that he's going to kill this, take it back to his tribe, and become, the best. And so he narrowly escapes with his life. He ends up, but he, in that kind of like, realizes that like the power, like it's strength. Strength is the most important thing. He ends up like getting cornered at this ledge and jumps off this, 1,000-foot cliff into the water, something like that. But not many people come back from hunting this thing. It kills them. But then he gets scolded. He gets back to the camp and gets scolded for using, if he's a resource for the tribe, he's gone and done this thing where he could have been used over here and saved tribe members in battles and combats, etc. But he went off this thing that was meant for heart renders or heart eaters and like leaders. Like that's who kills that thing, not a plains runner. And again, so he's belittled and made to feel less than. And so he kills the dude. He just jumps on him and starts punching him until his face is just mush.
Still ends up punching ground. Yeah.
One of the plot points I think that might not have been as clear is that it's not that he's just like, well, I'm a cool dude. I'm this person who deserves this thing. He's feeling this voice. He's feeling this other destiny to him. Right? He doesn't kill the old man because he's like, he's telling me I'm an idiot, so I'm going to kill him. He's like, no, I was told to do this. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? If I remember correctly, we're coming back to this idea that there is a voice given to individual characters, like a purpose and a mission. And that's what they're doing. And this beast speaker represents somebody saying, your voice and your mission is wrong. And he kills him because he's like, no, you don't understand. I know what's right.
Well, it's this, everything around him is telling him to pick the thing that's strong and big and tear it down. Mm-hmm. And so he's trying to do that, and it's often still outside of his station. So there's his desire to follow that, but then being curtailed by, well, that's not your place. And so, yeah, he's definitely got a voice telling him, kill the stronger thing, hunt the stronger thing. But then there's a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Again, part of what he's being told is to tear down hierarchies. So he gets up, but he's also, I mean, I don't want to rationalize what he did, right? It wasn't about being rational. Like he was absolutely irrational and murdered this dude. And so the tribe sees that he's been a traitor on their leader, their elder, and then they banish. So they take him out. The Heartrender decides that instead of killing him, which is too easy, they'd banish him. And basically it's that you're alone, right? You're alone in the wind spoils. You're alone in the 8 points. And when you're alone in the 8 points will kill you painfully over time, etc. But it's inevitable. So
They also stick an arrowhead or something under his skin, like in his cheek,
Yep.
to mark him as a exile or something, so that like no other pack would ever pick him up because of this like mark that he has.
So he goes on a little bit of a journey, surviving, dying, like almost near death a bunch of times, still pushing on. Again, here's where it's that delusion. Is it real? Like, is the Great Devourer really on his side? Is it keeping him alive? Is it, he talks about it like forming the land again to kind of push him where he needs to go. And he happens upon the battlefield where he first killed that leader.
As if he was directed there.
Right.
The impression he gets.
That I must have, the land pushed me here. And he sees the head that he had killed. They'd mounted up all the bodies, put that leader's head on a pike. But it was there, but it was as if had just been cut off yesterday. But this had been, time had come on, years.
I was going to say, it would probably feel nice to see a familiar face, but he was on the
Well, there is a Wilson moment here, right? The Castaway, where he talks, he talks to the head first, expecting it to talk back to him, and then it does, and then it speaks to him and challenges him to what, again, back to his purpose. Your purpose is to tear things down, to see every tower come down, every wall to come down, etc. And so what do I have to do? And he says, drink. And so he cuts the skull off this thing, and it's full of blood, and it's just an endless cup. So again, is this real? Is this his delusion? He's drinking it in. It's blood everywhere. Like,
I'd say we've probably seen weirder stuff in Age of Sigmar. Honestly.
I would definitely say it's real, but
well, I'm not saying is it. Yeah, you're right. It could totally be possible. I just like the play of whether or not it's in his head that this is how it's happening, or if he's actually like drinking from an endless cup of blood.
If this were any other setting, I would agree with you. But like, this is the one place where it's almost assuredly.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. So it directs him. He has to kill the Harrow. Says you have to go and take that beast down. So
fast forwards quite a bit, right, in time.
Yep.
Which is kind of a bummer because it skips over what I think was one of the things I was most rooting for, or like looking forward to see.
Which is
when he rolls back up to his old war band and then just kills everybody who exiled him.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, the cool scene in so he goes to fight the Harrow and he wins, but he decides he can't be more cunning than the Harrow. But the Harrow is just strength, like the way you beat it is strength. And this scrawny guy, I'm sure he's been more ripped or whatever. But like the earth respects him. It doesn't try and kill him. Like the tree he climbs up in to hide just kind of covers him. And he goes to fight it. And the Harrow bites down on him. Like, so his body's like halfway in, halfway out. He had like launched a javelin into its eye. And he just like pure muscle, like starts ripping the skull off of this thing. And kills it. So it's just this, but it's this, again, de-evolution into rage. Etc. So yeah, fast forwards, he's now the Heartrender of his tribe. He's gone back and he's wearing like the heads of, like he's gone back and beat the Beast Speaker. He's gone back and beat the Heartrender. He's
wearing the head of the Heartrender. He's wearing the hands of the archer,
the Beast Speaker. Yeah.
And he's wearing the tanned hide of the Beast Speaker.
So he's just, they adorn him like those are his memories now.
Blinged out.
And he's still got the what is an arrowhead or spearhead in his eye, and he basically is the unspoken dare to anybody to ever bring it up, and no one ever says a word about it. Yeah.
And so now they have been tracking over this ridge and looking down upon an Iron Golem fortress that they've just built up this huge foundry. And this is kind of cool. They have there's two Iron Golem Dominars, their brother and sister. And they both have a throne surrounded by anvils and forges. And they're just overseeing every single weapon that comes through there. It's very industrial. It's very like, just think of the Iron Age,
if you had to pick something to tear down, like that's a prime candidate.
Yeah. The military industrial complex. So they go in, but as he's going in, he's realizing he needs to tear these down. He goes in and fights. And the voice in his head says, you need to tear every wall down. And so that turns his mind towards his own tribe. And even that needs to go. And so as they're all like, he's riding in on an avalanche of earth. Like he's earth surfing in. He comes down on it. And then he starts, they all start fighting. And he just turns on everybody. And starts killing Untamed Beast and Iron Golem alike, and Smashing Face, and then everyone's like, okay, I know that we're supposed to be fighting you, but that dude is crazy. And they all dogpile on him and take him out. And like the last thing that happens is like there's a pile in the middle, and he's in the middle just getting taken down. And the story ends with years in the future or sometime in the future, another heart eater coming upon this site, seeing this place, walking up to this pile of bodies, and the head on top, fresh as if it were just decapitated yesterday. And it speaks to her of tearing down walls and towers and to drink of it.
Yeah, so, the head of our main character, that's how he closes it out.
Yeah. Back to when he goes wild, or he goes crazy and he starts killing everybody. There's a phrase that sort of triggers his change of character or perspective. It's because the reason he's willing to both kill the Iron Golems and the Untamed Beast is because it doesn't matter where the blood flows from.
Oh, yeah. And that was the twist I didn't expect. Yeah. Like all along the way, the characteristic of this voice feels very Untamed Beast. It feels like in my head, I'm like, okay, he's following the god, the devourer of the Untamed Beast, and these other brothers and sisters and tribesmates. They're like maybe adhering to each other too much. Like he's the one who's being the real Untamed Beast. Turns out, Corn's been talking to him.
Well,
and spoiling him to just become this crazy murder dude. And it like that's the journey of some of these warbands, where as individuals or as tribes can diverge from their soft chaos into super, like, one of these four gods and just go all in and what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it in a couple ways. I could see it as explicitly Corn being around. I mean, obviously there's that hint in there, but it could also be, since some of these aspects of chaos they worship are like kind of a combined, all that, like this may be the cornate aspect of the devourer. So it could still be the devourer, but that comes to the fore.
I saw it almost as just like some lowly demon is like, hey, I can get a hold of this one person, right? And like maybe that is a bloodletter or something, but like I didn't see it as Corn giving him attention, right? He didn't get any mutations, he didn't get any special power. It was just like
to be a living head.
Well, no, I do think he got special powers.
Sure,
like the dude
was,
but not. I don't feel cornate, but I definitely think he got untamed.
I mean, it was just raw brute power, where like this small body could rip the head off of this, Gordrake. Well, so like I think the special powers were there because he's a plains runner doing ridiculous things, and I think carrying out where the blood where the blood flows is the hint, right? That doesn't mean though you can't read it as it could be another. See, sub. It could have been a bloodthirster calling to him, right?
I'm gonna take it at face value. I think Corn's knocking on that door.
Sure,
and was and bringing this dude into the fold.
See, what I felt like is that this was the story of somebody from the Untamed Beast who was succumbing to lesser chaos, right, or greater chaos, right? Because the Untamed Beast had a very specific structure of like how life was going on, and if we go back to the Cypher Lords story, right, the main character is very much living out what the Cypher Lords were doing. If we go back to the Untamed, very much living out what the Untamed were telling them to do.
Unmade?
The Unmade. With this one, the main character is going against everything the Untamed Beast stand for, which, you're absolutely right, does fit in with the storyline, but it doesn't fit in with the civilization. And at the end of the story, we find out that he's actually following something that's not part of the Untamed Beast, legend. So I thought it was really interesting because we read two stories where you follow in and do exactly what you're supposed to.
Yep.
And this is the person where the character was obviously intended to be wrong. He shoots his best friend in the eye, like at the beginning of the end of the battle. Like this guy who's like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is great! You're such a great guy!" And then he just turns around and shoots him in the eye, and you're like, "Okay, I don't like that jerk anymore." That guy's a total jerk.
Direct quote from the book, too.
Yeah. So that was cool. Again, with subverting expectations.
Yep. I did not see that twist coming at the end.
I didn't either. What are some other things that we liked? Though honestly, the Corn thing was the biggest one for me.
I just like getting a sense of what, because there was this idea of the tribal hierarchy, and to me, of the three we've read so far, this was the first one that gave me, or of the three, gave me the most sense of what it was like to be a normal chaos worshiper. Normal being in air quotes for those who are listening and not watching.
I hate saying this without Josh here to rebuttal, so we'll talk about it on the next Dogs of Warcry. But just this last week, I played a game against Josh where my Planesrunner ran up and triple critted his Thrall Master. So there's the idea of this, the smallest, the weakest, coming up and having the capability to tear down something greater is something that we all kind of want to be able to accomplish more than our, too big for our britches kind of thing. And so there is definitely that kind of, I was feeling that as I was reading into it, because that was already happening on the table for me. So
this definitely had also a bit of a Norse or a Chaos Marauder old world feel to it. The story, at least, a very tribal, very classic Warhammer feel to me.
All right, cool. We'll do the reviews. I liked it. I wouldn't say it ranked particularly highly for me from just a pure plot storyline. But the twist with the corn thing is really what sealed the deal for me. So that cemented it in the thumbs up category for me.
I just like the time differentials. It just kept skipping ahead, which it just gave me a sense of, I don't know, making it more important by it spanning time, I guess.
Yeah, I liked it for that interesting structure to the story that made it engaging above and beyond, what you were learning about the Age of Sigmar universe.
It was cool.
Paul thinks it's cool. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to read or talk about Proving Ground by Sarah Cockwell. And so this is the Corvus Cabal story.
Is it weird that part of her last name is Call? And we're talking about ravens.
What? No, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
I wonder. Sarah, tell us about it. So this story, this is another one of those stories that kind of starts out a little trippy because it goes into sort of a preamble about this tree and sort of the outskirts of the city, because this is another story that is set in Carne Grad. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Excellent, nailed it. So
nailed it.
Yeah,
the tree has thorns in it.
When I was talking earlier about kind of that journey into the city, this is the story that kind of gives you that outskirts, then into the suburbs, and then into the city proper, etc. So It does that kind of brings you in, and then you're up on the rooftops.
Yeah, up
with Santa Claus.
Quick, damn it! All right, so we're following Locke, who is a spire stalker of the Corvus Cabal.
Jimmery, Corvus Cabal.
And so I think that the story opens with that little segment about the tree, but when we meet Locke, he's on a rooftop and he's getting chased by a bunch of Splinterfang. So apparently they're just the quintessential bad guys in this anthology. And so he's sort of leading him on a chase, and eventually, I don't know, he gets tired of it or something. He turns around and he's like, "Oh man, it's 3-on-1. They should have sent more." And then he proceeds to very handily deal with
this is
them.
an uneven battle. For you.
Because this is his landscape is the rooftops of this city, and so he handles them pretty easily.
What do they call? What do the Corvus call everybody else? The low ones.
The low folk.
Low folk. The sense I got was they're up high. There could be many layers to this, but certainly they're the ones who are up in the tops, master the roofs, and everyone else has to be stuck on the ground. And the Splintered Fang are not as adept at this.
No. This is easily my favorite description of the fighting. They're talking about the slate roofs, and the Corvus Cabal is dancing from tile to tile, and the Splintered Fang are just cracking tiles and falling off the roof, and almost they can't contain themselves. Which is I thought was just a super evocative and very clear picture.
Sure. And it's at this point, and I think later on in the story too, it talks about his clawed boots a lot, and he's always about to slip, but his boots catch. So he's decked out in accoutrement that allows him to to handle the
I do feel justified referencing parkour again, though.
Sure. And every time he jumps, he yells parkour. Yeah.
Parkour.
So he fights off these Splinterfang, and he takes trophies from each of them. So he's cutting off hands and teeth and a bunch of other stuff. Man, that also seems like a theme of this anthology. And he proceeds to meet up with a contact, and I can't remember what they talk about or what the contact looks like, but I remember it being weird. Like, what was the...
This is what, let's see. You have the price. For such a distorted face, the voice was mellifluous, even pleasant. And so it's some weird kind of mutant thing. And I can't remember if this was like what was the low folk or if low folk was everybody, but like there's some weird like subhuman race that exists in and around the city that they use as contacts.
Well, at the beginning, they mentioned somebody who's got a mutation and how like they scavenge and that they're not tolerated by much. You get it here, and at the end, you see somebody else who seems to be kind of like a witness, like they're the eyes and ears. These mutated people, I get the sense that they're kind of the eyes and ears of the city, and I think he's using them to spread information. So we find out that he was being chased because he lured them into chasing him, and he's kind of trying to pick off some of these Splintered Fang little by little.
Yeah. So, like Carne Grad itself, right, is Carnal City, Carne Grad.
Got it.
Right? And they talk about how these low folk, right, they survive on the droppings of everything that's going on. In Corvus Cabal's story here, it's very literally like the things that drop from the higher levels of the city because the poor can't afford to live anywhere else. So they're scrabbling and eating whatever food substance that is on the ground, which turns them into these like base humans.
He says like when he kicks the people off the roof, he's like, they're going to eat well tonight. Yeah.
Exactly, because they're eating the bodies, right? Like anything that falls from above. And we also got this a little bit in the Cypher Lords too. When he got into the city, it's just like, these are just the scum of the earth, right? This is what the Chaos City is. That anybody who cannot make it to a place that's defensible is basically just garbage.
It's almost as if someone should make a cool shantytown board to play Warcry in.
No pressure. Working on it.
So Locke talks to this informant, and then he goes back to this like
The
nest
Yeah.
inside of a building. So you might think of like, oh, it's supposed to be this like bunch of bones, and we're on top of a roof. It's in that. No, it's actually like some little hidden room back in a building.
So it's metaphorical, not literal.
Yeah, it's a little bit more metaphorical. But then he deposits these treasures in a little pile in a corner of the room.
That's what I call it too.
And they call this the pick, right? Like they're the leader, the Shrike Master, Shrike Talon, has first pick over all the trophies that are there. And as they go down in
status,
they get lesser and lesser things from the pick. But this is something that is specifically spelled out in the background book, but also in this story is that these trees have a special meaning to them, and they very much are like ravens. They like shiny things. They want to collect treasures, and they put it on themselves as well. They'll wear these shiny things as well. But when they give sacrifices to their god, which is the Great Gatherer, they literally pin bodies on these trees that have these huge thorns poking up out of them, and then the pick is beneath it. But in Carne Grad, that's a little disrupted because they have these lowborn that live in the ground.
So this is where we get some hierarchy between him and the Shrike Master, Shrike Talon. He's reporting back to her, and he's about this. We kind of discover more about this plan that he is supposed to be kind of ahead of, and that's kind of pulling out there's definitely a tension between the Corvus Cabal in this area and the Splinter Fang for this territory, for this space. And they're trying to eliminate the Splintered Fang, and so they're trying to draw out the True Blood or the kind of the master of the Splintered Fang. And so he says it's in motion. He's got plans, and he's got something that he's trying to do. And can I have support? And she's like, "You'll have enough." And so we just get a sense that there's a hierarchy. There's a part of playing the game as a Corvus Cabal is winning favor and getting people to flock with you.
Yeah, so like the idea is like he has to convince people to join him. Like they'll join him if they want to. Like,
but which is interesting as a hierarchy, and it's not a command. It's a proving yourself, and people fall more like, I guess, a little bit. I don't know, the blissful ones, kind of were given warbands. The
Cipher
Thrall
Lord,
Master
yeah.
kind of, just controls people.
Creates them.
The Untamed Beasts have a structure that they want people to adhere to that's a prove yourself kind of like that. And so this might be more like that, but it almost feels like independent. Like, see who you can gather or muster around you.
Yeah.
Or can trust you.
And they don't seem like permanent things. Like, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not get people like joining up.
Yep.
Mhm. I mean, like, I think I've got the sense that they were birds, right? They literally can be, they're just everywhere. And so if you want to go do something, go. Great. Have fun. If you can bring people with you, great. If not, then it's not important enough, right? Like, it is, the organization is that there is no organization. So whoever wants to follow you will follow you, and that determines how powerful you are.
It's kind of like this podcast.
A little bit.
I don't know. I feel like you're a little more of a Thrall Master.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is all the drugs I give you.
Mm.
At any rate, so he eventually sets his plan in motion. And I think the scene cuts at this point, or around this time, where we actually get the Splintered Fang perspective, which is odd because this is very sort of squarely Corvus Cabal story. But it turns out they have picked up the rumors that Locke has been laying down, which is to say,
Picked up what Locke laid down.
they've heard that an ancient Splintered Fang artifact has been found in the city. And they want to get their hands on it, basically. And so they're willing to do anything to go get it.
Yep.
That's really about it. Like, it gives you the perspective of like, all right, well, to show you that the plan that Locke has put into place is taking hold.
Yeah. And there's two things that are unique about this story is that, number one, we get a first-person perspective from two different warbands. We have theoretically the good guys and the bad guys, right? But number two is that we don't really have any description or consideration given to where the Corvus Cabal came from. We don't really have this is where our city was
origin
from.
or
This is what about the realm that we're bringing with us. The Corvus Cabal just kind of are, which kind of goes.
Are you saying their background is still shrouded in shadow and mystery?
It absolutely is.
From Ulgu?
And so when we're introduced to this second warband of the Splintered Fang, this spear was lost and is now found, and if this person gets the spear, then they'll become the most powerful Splintered Fang that there is and have all kinds of followers, etc., which ends up leading to this long path through the desert for the Splintered Fang. They're trying to catch this caravan.
Yeah, it has the kind of a thing we've seen before where the Splintered Fang are like, it's too good to be true, it's probably a trap. But what if it's not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then a little bit of and if it's not a trap, then we'll kill whoever is that.
Yeah.
We'll trap the trap.
Yeah.
Because we know it's a trap.
We know it's
it
a
can't
trap,
be a trap.
so it can't be a trap.
Well, listen to the trap music.
Yeah, and so we kind of get that Locke's kind of plans and machinations kind of get to them. They fill in the dots, kind of enough there to prove that maybe it is real.
Connect the dots and fill in the blanks.
Yep. Crossword puzzle, Sudoku, and then they kind of go for it. But so then Locke gets his flock, and he's a little disappointed that it's only 10 members. He's trying not to feel bad about it, but he feels bad about it.
As he's like trying to get out of Carne Grad to go pursue this, they get ambushed by a flock of harpies.
Oh, I forgot about the Furies.
Furies, sorry. They get ambushed by a flock of Furies.
I really liked that they sidetracked this for this because it's in the game and you wanted it somewhere.
Yeah.
This was a really cool place because they're up on the rooftops.
Yeah.
They come down to this plot and they've just fallen into a Fury trap.
Well, and it's super kind of meta ironic of the people who have feathers and act like they can fly are getting ambushed by the things that can actually fly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and he's like, I should have scouted it out, but he was thinking so much about his revenge and get his plans, his machinations that he just wasn't paying attention. And that's, that again, part of the story of chaos is that you get hellbent on something and then something takes you out, right?
Well, but they're also looking at this tree, right? And then they're like, oh, these are fresh kills here. This is actually one of their holy trees, right? With the thorns, etc. This is a recurring theme. So this is theoretically a sign to Locke that his mission is not necessarily, blessed by the Great Gatherer because they're being ambushed at this place of reverence.
there's the Fury attack. They're able to fend them off, but they lose a lot of people in the process. And Locke does not have enough, like a lot of folks to begin with. So like these losses hurt him. But they're able to progress or like, make their way, I guess, out of the city. Like what happens next? I feel like this story I don't remember as well.
We flip back to the Splintered Fang. They've been delayed because the weather changed. And here we get bone shards or a bone storm or something like that, where shards or spears or something is coming out of the sky, and like everybody's getting like shredded or whatever. And her advisors are saying, "Hey, let's hold up, let's wait. They've got scouts out there. Tell us back." And she's like, "Let's keep going." And so it's low visibility, night is day, day is night, whatever. They're traveling through a ravine, and they end up getting to a forest. And this is the place we were at the very beginning. This is the secret place for the Corvus Cabal, and where Locke had intended them to get driven to. Ending's this last part is a little bit confusing because you start from the point of view of the Splintered Fang, kind of getting picked off in the dark. It's very, they could have pushed, this could have been a part where they pushed the horror, but it's very just kind of matter of fact, and then they get to this place with, it's cleared out, day is broken a little bit more, but it's still foggy. She tells somebody to climb a tree to get a better vantage point. And at this point, like he says it's fine. The tree's like covered in thorns. It's a very not a great place. He goes to start climbing it, and then all of a sudden, thump, I think he gets nailed with a knife and falls down from the tree. And she turns around, and she can't see any of her Splintered Fang. Mm-hmm. And a Corvus Cabal comes out of the darkness and rushes her.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know who it is at this point, so like just getting picked off. And then we switch back to Locke's point of view 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
And they're fighting Splintered Fang, and he's got people taking people, but they're not. They're kind of like doing this screech, this call, this kind of shorthand. We can't take this. We're outnumbered. He's getting that back from his flock, and he's like, "We fly together, we die together," kind of thing. Fly or die.
Yeah. Quack.
Quack. Quack. Quack. Quack. Quack. And then he gets to the point where it's just him and her, Ophidia and Locke. And so we find out at this point that the story's been about both. Like it started off like you think that it's just a Corvus Cabal story, but it's very much a Splintered Fang story at the same time. And I literally, as I was going back and forth, I'm like, okay, I don't know who's going to win at this. And we get this final showdown. I'm not going to tell you who wins. Somebody else do it.
Paul, tell me who wins.
I think Locke wins.
Well, does anyone win though?
No. Basically, there was this really cool moment where the fog starts to lift, and then Ophidia looks up, and every member of her warband is impaled on one of the thorns. Right? Like, it was this.
And they did something where when the Corvus Cabal killed them, they mount them up on the trees to make it look like their shadows.
Yeah.
Like there was more Corvus Cabal around than there really were.
Yeah.
So she's like, I see through that.
Yeah. And they get to the end, and they basically kill each other, and it's a Pyrrhic victory again. Locke becomes part of his own pick.
Oh,
yep.
No.
Yep. She poisons him with like a boot knife, because everything they have is poisonous. And he starts like twisting, like what's the Harry Potter curse that makes you
Cruciatus?
Yeah, where it just makes your body just bend and twist or whatever.
I'm not exactly sure.
And it's the one that's like forbidden. Anyway, doesn't matter. So his body just starts twisting, and like his joints are just going the wrong way, etc. She goes over to the tree and starts defacing it, and he's just like, the gatherer, like she's talking to the coiling ones. He's like, gatherer, don't let this happen. And so he gets the last bit of his strength, and he rushes her, slams into her. She gets impaled on one of the spikes, and he gets to see her dying, like her face as she passes. And that's enough for him. And then the last thing he hears is the beating of wings.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
which
super
is
sweet.
the sound of the gatherer coming to take him.
All right, neat. So that's the Corvus Cabal story.
My only critique was maybe the Fury part could have been shorter.
Yeah.
And just had them harangue them a bit, harass them, take a few people out, and then keep going.
Was there as much story if they take that out, though? I feel like it was despite how long we've talked about it, it seemed like a condensed. Not a lot was actually happening.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it being, shorter. I don't think it added. It would have made it shorter, but I don't think it added more to the story by having it.
I see.
I agree. I would have liked to gain some extra insight into, I thought it was really cool, the idea of the pick and the, but it would have been cool if we heard a little bit about where they're from in Ulgu. Or something like
I missed that.
I wanted, there was time taken up by Furies and time taken up by Splintered Fang, which kind of bummed me out a little bit because I think I really like the Corvus models. I like the idea of them.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted more of them here, and I felt like I got more than I did from the Cypher Lords. Although I felt like I got a good chunk there, and this was more than that, but not as much more than that as I would have liked.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Like you mentioned, just it's a little things they drop. And I checked, you're correct. They refer to anyone who's not of their warband as the low folk, and those are little tasty gems that I really enjoy.
They have a thieves' cant that they use to shorthand and talk, like a sign language and some cawing and stuff. So they've got when they talk to not them, when he's talking to his superior, it's very clear English to us when we're reading it. When they talk to anybody else, it's broken and short and, not very articulate.
Mm-hmm.
So so it's kind of an interesting how they talk to the people. Or how they talk to themselves sounds very clear, and they know exactly what each other's saying. So there's tidbits like that you do get, but I think I would like to see more. But it was a cool ending. I didn't know which way it was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I was surprised by it.
Paul, what'd you think of the story? We'll do the review.
I enjoyed the story. I, like Davey, wanted more of where they came from, why they believe what they believe. We didn't get that at all. And I wanted a little bit more focus on the Corvus Cabal just because they're my favorite, but you definitely got an idea for what their background was. And there's also a decent amount about how they play on the table too. So I was like, oh, I read this story. Now I know actually what some of the abilities are intended to do. So when I was playing the game, I was like, oh, that actually, that's what the point of this warband is. That was pretty cool.
Right on. This is another one that wasn't necessarily towards the top, and I like the Corvus Cabal. Is one of my favorite warbands, so I was a little bit bummed out. We learned a lot of details, but I guess maybe the story, to my mind, was a little lacking. I don't have much else to say.
It was like a fun action movie.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
A buddy cop movie or something like that, or where you're just okay, we know what now that we've read it, we know what we're in for.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as much of the intrigue that they kind of alluded to early on.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't an introduction to the Corvus Cabal warband, it didn't feel like. It was more of a story that would set in a normal anthology. So.
Sure. And that's not to say it was written poorly. I think it was written just fine.
Yep.
It was just maybe I was expecting more out of it. Cool. So that's Proving Ground. We got another one. It's called Eight-Tailed Naga by David Geimer.
We like David.
Friend of the show. Yeah. See, that's the thing, is I can say anyone's friend of the show.
Yeah. And they're under our thrall.
One way friendship. All right, cool. So what are we dealing with? Now we're finally talking about
the actual Splintered Fang.
So Splintered Fang have been the second string in 2 stories now.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's time for them to take charge, and by that I mean we are introduced into this story by someone who is not of the Splintered Fang. David, who are we introduced to?
Your main character here that you start with is Merrick, and he's down in a pit of snakes.
Aren't we all, though,
It
right?
had to be snakes. Right?
Dun, 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 dun.
And it's clear that he's whatever his situation is, he's lost some kind of fight with the Splintered Fang, and
so still the bad guys.
Oh yeah, I mean, we talk about good guys and bad guys here on this podcast. I've heard people say that. It's just bad guys. Sure. Yeah.
Billie Eilish agrees.
So but he's getting bitten, and he gets picked by this particularly big snake, and the last thing he sees, he's getting bitten by that. We get some tidbits that he had a wife he's not sure where his wife's at.
Sure. Well, in the first couple of pages of this book, he still has a wife.
Sure. Yeah.
In the pit. Yep.
Which is something that I thought was cool right off the bat, because it was just like that throwaway line about families and hovels back in the Cypher Lord story. Here it was like, oh yeah, I mean, you you still get married when you're the
And
blood when spoiled.
furthermore, she's the
more
butt kicker.
devout,
Yeah.
devout chaos worshiper. She's the more all in on. So that was cool, but it turns out he survives this encounter, and it's some kind of like test of your mettle is to be in here. If you survive the bit, if you're chosen by a particular snake,
Nagendra or Mauna Loa.
Yeah, Mauna Loa is like some sort of avatar or something of Nagendra, or basically it's saying like you're worthy of being part of the warband. So he wakes up, he's weak because he's beaten up, and he's being nursed to health by a member of this warband. And this is a little interaction that I particularly enjoyed. This young member of the Splintered Fang is talking. He calls him Maasi. He apparently Marek has gotten a Splintered Fang name. Like he's basically been kind of reborn into this. But this young man is trying to nurse him back into health. He says, here's food. You eat it. You put it in your mouth. You eat it like this. And he's like, yeah, I know what food is. And he's like, oh, well, perhaps you do not eat. Strange peoples I have encountered on the coiling path. Strange things I have seen. Those who drink only the blood of their infants, or who bask in the lights of the 8 star and grow fat on it like blood fruits. Those who do not eat at all. Perhaps you drink fire from air, or take vigor from your god by smearing the hearts of your foes into your skin. And I thought it was cool. It was like, man, this is an alien world where this guy reasonably thinks like, yeah, maybe you don't eat. Like maybe you need to be told like, here's a way you could get some sustenance from this food. I thought even this, I don't know, and you wonder how much of it is, again, like how much of it is this is somebody who's not very educated and so is misinterpreting things that he's saying, and how much is things that he actually is saying.
To your point earlier, he's like, or maybe you cut the heads off the skulls and drink endless blood from them. Like it's just something that
I've
might
heard
happen
it somewhere. Yeah.
I read it in a story.
And there's more good interaction. He gives him something to eat or drink, and Marek is like, "How do I know it's not poisoned?" And the guy's like, come on." And then he eats it, and he's like, "Yeah, it was poisoned." Oh man! I was like, "No, it's fine. You already survived getting chomped by Mauna Loa, so like you're good to go here. If that didn't take you out, this won't." So
it's a minor poison.
Yeah. They make mention that they're from Invidia. Gairan, it's a city in Gairan that they're coming from. And there's a Papa Yaga, which is cool. He gets introduced to him. That's sort of the elder of this tribe. This guy, I really enjoyed the description.
A serpent caller, right? Is that what that level is?
I was getting that. Yeah. I was getting that vibe, right? Yeah. So he's got some sort of sorceress. This guy is like old and withered and like looks like his teeth are falling out, but he's also like weirdly boneless. Like he's got these snake-like hair. Like he, is able to flex and writhe and stuff like a snake. And so he's pretty fun anytime he's getting some quote unquote screen time.
Dance him.
Yeah. So
Yoga fire.
But there's this tension. He's like, you came and killed my farmstead, and their farmstead, it mentions a few times like we were harvesting like blood and meat, and that it was, again, talking about Paul. This is the closest you're going to get to farmers. This is the closest you get to farmers in the blood when spoiled, which apparently do exist, and it's just weird to think about how you go about being that or doing that. But he says, you took us by poison. That's lame. That's not like what the chaos gods are looking for. They want you to fight in an open battle, and like, no, we disagree. Like,
Sure.
we follow the coiling path. We do things our way.
Were these folks like corn devotees? Or did I, not to keep harping on this concept, but like I feel like I walked away with that impression as well. That like, especially with the wife, and like
I feel like the Corvus in the last story looked down on the poisoning. Like, use your skill, the cunning, the what you were given, as opposed to something like poison.
Yeah, I think of them, and this is just there's nothing particularly here to say this. They could have been full on corn, like is our main guy. But I got the idea of like considering it like a Greek pantheon. Like, okay, if sickness comes, pray to Grandfather Nurgle.
Oh, sure.
If it's fighting time, give corn the heads up, and
Gotcha.
all that sort of thing. So,
well, I mean, give him a lot of heads up, right? Like,
all the heads up.
Yeah,
that's staying in.
They give him his wife's knife. Talks about some of this armory. So he's right on this edge of like, do I want to rebel? When will I rebel? When I'm going to do this? But like being brought along with this warband, sort of as a conversion.
The cactus rind armor plate was kind of
yeah. I mean, it's something that puts you in. It was a specific detail that rooted you in what this was. It talks about his farm like there are 5 families under my roof, said Merrick, sharing the skulls we took and the blood we harvested. But I saw only Jerissa with me in the pit. What happened to everyone else? They all went into the pit.
Yeah, they're there too.
Yeah. So he resents, like it starts off. He really resents these tribesmen, but these Splintered Fang. But because he's on the outside looking in as he gets to be part of this warband, you kind of learn from it. So you get some cool background on how the warband interacts and what they look like, and they have this sort of cold-blooded, like indolent. They're kind of lazing around a lot of time until it's go time, whatever. So
well, they're hanging out with snakes constantly. Like it's like they're in a tent and the floor is just a carpet of snakes, and so like this pit isn't the only interaction with actual
like if there was a
snakes.
plane, there'd be snakes on it.
Well, maybe.
You mean the Blood Wind Spoil is a plane? There's snakes on this plane?
Planes of existence.
There's probably planes on the Blood
Also,
Spoils.
some of the warband members like have like snake eyes, right? Like they,
Yep.
I think it even says like they don't have lids or something like that, which again, harkening back to
colorless eyes.
Yeah.
I think the way you're describing this, and this main character Merrick, like you mentioned earlier, like everybody's bad. I do think though, it seems like they do a great job of coloring that. Like there's shades of bad, and if you're in a world where everything around you is bad, like there's the floor of or the ceiling of good raises,
sure,
right? Or the floor of bad raises to where like if you're just a guy with a family and you're taking care of a family and you murder people who would probably murder you, but it's just a regular thing. Oh, I got to go out and like kill the Ravagers again. Like that starts being less bad. You're like, okay,
sure.
It's like gophers, right?
like
out on the prairie. It's you don't want to anyway. But I think in that they do again a good job of painting that like it's relative. Bad is a relative thing.
Yeah, I mean he's a farmer. He farms blood and he kills people a lot, but he's still a farmer. Like he's just.
But again, yeah, and his life is 100 square miles, and did not choose to be born there or live there.
Sure,
he's just surviving.
But by him coming in from the outside, it gives the author an excuse to kind of to introduce some of these core concepts. So we find out that the Splintered Fang, they're guided by the Writhing Ones, and the Writhing Ones are descendants of Nagendra, who is an ancient god beast, quote unquote, slain by another of its kind, and they're trying to herald the return of this Nagendra, and so that's kind of the overall. They're working on a path to make that happen. And you get the sense that wherever you are in the Splintered Fang, that's something you're trying to bring about.
So then it cuts, right? Like, so then he's been in it for a hot second, and they end up in like a desert scene or something like that, and he's walking around with his pal, the one who had sort of initially nursed him back to health, and they want to work with him because they think he knows the lay of the land or something, because they're after. Oh wait, no, that's what it is. Actually, he was having visions because of the poison that they gave him, and sort of his initiation rite. And so, because of those visions, he had called out, and the rest of the Splintered Fang realized that he has some knowledge, or he may has this connection to the eight-tailed Naga, and that's how they want to use him. Is they think that because of those visions, that he'll be able to lead them to their quarry. And I think it's around this conversation that they're out in the desert that. They're like poking around in the sand or something, and it turns out like under the sand is a layer of like brass, which also makes me think that they're somehow beholden to corn because they're in a brass area. But as they're poking in the sand, someone spots like a footprint. They're like, "What's that?" And it's like, "I don't know. It's just a divot in the sand, man. Like, it's no big deal." Turns out there's no such thing as just divots in the sand, and it's actually a untamed beast warband lying in wait, who I think buried themselves under the desert sands, and they erupt out, and then there's this big battle, because of course there has to be a battle. This is a Black Library book. And so the two forces fight, and the Splintered Fang overcome the untamed beasts with their wily poisons.
Untrue.
But
I mean, Baba Yaga takes down, because they have a number of rock tusks.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Baba Yaga takes one down. Like this old dude is like juking out of the way, writhing out of the way. Like this is where he kind of comes into it. I enjoyed this battle a lot actually. Like, and our hero wasn't like, oh, I'm just like kicking butt and taking names. I mean, our hero, our point of view, I should say. Like at one point he's frozen in fear, like, whoa, I'm gonna get ate by this rock tusk. And Baba Yaga like stabs it, poisons it, its leg stops working, and so it's flopping around, and it was pretty fun. Even just the idea of them popping up from the sand was pretty cool.
Well, it's kind of like a chaotic like battle because like he's just running around trying to survive. Like not that he's useless, but I mean he ends up being the equivalent of. And like at one point he like stares down the other like leader or something. He's able to like dodge out of the way and escape him. But as the fight comes to its conclusion, it turns out like the only one left alive from the Untamed Beast side is that leader. What is the Heart Eater or whatever it is. Apparently, like, he knows this group of Splintered Fangs, like, they've interacted before, and he's like, I mean, you can't blame me for attacking you, you killed, like, 4 of my dudes the other day, and the Splintered Fang is like, yeah, but only because you killed 3 of our guys the day before. So it was, like, kind of that, like, irreverent, like, back and forth.
All right, see you next Tuesday, Frank.
Yeah, exactly. And so it
we'll
comes
get you
out
next time.
what they're after. And they get it out of the Untamed Beast leader guy saying, like, all right, well, we're after this. Well, I forget how the conversation goes, but they're able to suss out the fact that, like, he has some idea of where this 8-tailed Naga is. He's like, I think maybe he calls it something different, but he's like, yeah, I could lead you to it after some coercion. He doesn't volunteer, but, like, they're like, you take us there. He's like, all right, fine. And so they head off, like, deeper into the desert to try and, find this beast.
There is also this personal struggle with Merrick, though, when they're fighting the battle, where he's using his wife's knife, right? And he's like cutting, etc. And people are like, "Oh, let's put some poison on it." He's like, "No, we're not putting poison. This is my wife's. I'm not going to dishonor her memory with this, right?" And then it eventually gets knocked out of his arm, and he just picks up a sword and he cuts someone, and then he like waits to like start fighting again, and they immediately just like die from the poison horrendously, and they're like, okay, now you're one of us because you used the poison, right?
My wife would be so mad if I put poison on her knives.
I bet she would.
So they travel. I don't think much happens until they actually like. So he leads them to this like pit in the desert. Like it's this like you climb up a hillside and then it leads down into a lower space in the desert. And so they're the classic like. They send scouts out, but basically they're just overlooking. You guys can't see what I'm doing, but they're hands on their.
But I'm enjoying
army
it.
crawl.
Yeah, army crawl up the side of the hill, chins on their hands as they're peeking over at this little like I don't know ruin or like outpost thing, and it's this area overrun by I was gonna say goblins, but grots. TM.
Grotlins.
Grotlins. And so they're what are they doing there? So basically what they're like mining the brass I was talking about before, like from underneath the sand. So they've got big like makeshift drills and all sorts of like machinery and stuff.
They're farming the brass.
They're farming the brass.
That's mining. But yeah.
It's expensive. Think of all the brass tacks.
Yeah. You need a lot of them. And they get down to them constantly. And they also see that there's this beast. They can't really make it out, which I don't understand why, but for whatever reason in the story, it's like in this giant cage and grots are like climbing all over it and they're poking and prodding and every once in a while like it grabs one or something. But they see it and like that's what they sort of focus on. They're like, all right, well we got to get to that beast. And so they hang out for a while.
Do they do it?
Well, they totally do it, and then they basically just agree to do like a headlong charge, like just over the hill.
There it is. And they're like, there it is. It's there, guys. We're gonna go get it.
Man, also these guys fall for stuff all the time. Like, oh, you got this thing I want? All right, well, I'm just gonna walk up to it and grab it. And so they charge into the grots, and so the grots put up like a nominal defense, but like half of them are running away or trying to.
The Gratago?
They're grots.
Yeah, they're grots. I mean,
remember the Gratago.
Grot's gonna do what Grot's gonna do. And so half of them are hiding, but they're shooting arrows and stuff like that, and they're rushing in. They being the Splintered Fang. And so as they get closer, they realize that what's in this giant cage is not an 8-tailed Naga.
What?
But rather, it is
one-tailed.
It is an 8-footed Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
and in the carnage that
Twist.
ensues, the Ragnarok like breaks out of its cage. and just starts lighting dudes up. It's stabbing people constantly with its big old pointy pincher feet. It's attacking Grats, it's attacking the Splintered Fang left and right, and so this is basically towards the end of the story. It's this like final like stand against this giant beast, and folks that are trying to take it down, while all the while they're fighting the Grats that are running around haphazardly.
I love.
Why am I talking about this, Paul? You talk about it.
I love that. Like, there's this moment of like one of the Splintered Fang turns to the Heartrender and is like, "Dude, this isn't an 8-tailed Naga," and the Heartrender's like, "Yeah, you killed my entire warband. Of course it's not the 8-tailed Naga."
Yeah, F you, dude.
You knew this was the... Yeah, you're right. You killed everybody. I'm going to try and kill you. Right? So, like, the spider's going around and, like, everybody is just getting completely taken care of, including Baba Yaga.
Hey, everybody, just
like,
so you know, Paul's got the biggest smile on his face right now.
It's super awesome. So, like, everybody's
Spider
just
grin.
getting completely killed. The Grots are getting killed. The Untamed Beasts are getting killed. The Splintered Fang are getting killed. And then you have the main character, and he's like, "Oh, crap, I got bit. Like, this is poison. I'm getting poisoned. This is terrible, right?" And then he's like, "Wait, I've already been poisoned. I can deal with this." And then he takes his knife, and he cuts off part of the Arachnarok's foot. Or, leg.
Unimpale himself, which
Yeah.
is because he got...
To unimpale himself, and then shoves it on the end of his hand, and then it, like, solidifies into this, like...
Always goes back to Unmade.
Yeah.
Just adding weird appendages and stuff.
And then... and then it forms as part of his arm, and he's like, "No, I get it now. Like, I'm fully invested. This is what it means now. So now I have to make a Splintered Fang warband out of Arachnarok bits."
Yeah. Also, his realization is like, we don't have to stay here and try and kill this spider. Let's Diddy Mal. Let's get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
Well, and doesn't... Because still they're under the impression that they're after this 8-tailed Naga. Doesn't at one point he call himself the 8-tailed? Did I make that up? Like... Okay, I'll cut it if not. But
I'm going to go with yes.
I thought like it was like, "Oh, we were after me all along," sort of thing. The real treasure was the me we found along the way. Maybe I'm misassuming, but basically, there's no one left alive. Like he gets his cool like new Arachnarok weapon. And he's like, "All right, cool, let's bounce
Boogie.
out." But not even we. Like no one's really left. I'm going
It's
to
literally
bounce.
just like
Yeah.
this like monologue where he's like, "Dude, I'm awesome."
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. It's
He's
totally
talking,
awesome.
He's talking to his awesome hand now.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Davey, not to spoil too much, I know you seem to really like this story. What spoke to you about it?
So I liked, they're just the little bits they dropped. Like Paul talked about, no poison on my wife's knife. They are walking and they haven't fought in a while, and so he's cutting his hand and dripping blood into the sand, and the young guy with him is like, "What are you doing?" You got to placate the blood guy. We haven't killed anything in days. Like, if I don't do this, we got to give him something.
Yeah.
It was just it had enough room, and the story was constructed in a way that lets you learn in sort of a natural and evolving way about not only the warband but also about the blood wind spoils. And I really enjoyed learning those bits and pieces, and I thought the fights were well constructed and they didn't outlast their welcome. So this is the warband I was maybe least interested to learn about, and ended up being one of the ones I enjoyed the most.
The beauty of low expectations. Paul, what do you think?
I enjoyed it quite a bit. It also, I think, gave us a narrative reason why the Splintered Fang were in so many of the stories, because this is the one warband that doesn't have to be from their homeland, because they convert as they're going along. They throw people in the snake pits. This is not a one-time thing, but that's why there's an elf. That's why there are different races in their warband, and it's possible that they are the most perfidious or most populous of the warbands in the Bloodwind Spoil, since they're converting everybody that they find into them or killing them. Right.
I mean, those two options: either convert them or we kill you.
Exactly.
Isn't that life in general?
Sure.
Yeah. I also really liked the just Far East or vibe that was written into the background, where we had Muad'Dish, which seemed very much like a harem guard or something like that trope, and then we had the Dhalsim type character of Baba Yaga, where he's doing all this kind of. There was a lot of other cultures that were fit into the fantasy universe here. And it was a very diverse warband. It wasn't like the Untamed Beast where it's like, we're all nomads and we all wear skulls and we all do this, right? The thing about the serpents is that they all have the same armor, but the actual figures themselves are males, they're elves, they're different, right?
That's cool. It's weird. I never, in this story and any of the other stories with the Splintered Fang, I never really saw them play up the gladiatorial aspect of it, right? Which, like, it was sort of surprising to me because I feel like, at least visually, that is a large component of it. Like, they were throwing nets at some point, which, you know, is some component.
What did a net ever do to deserve getting thrown?
Well, sometimes there's nothing but nets. So that was
Tristan, that one was for you,
right? I'm free to do the basketball podcast, Michael Jordan. So that was just one thought that I had. I did like this story. It's almost as if I liked the way it was written and like kind of those little details more than I cared for the story specifically itself. Though I guess the spider at the end was a fun little twist. I didn't see that coming either. So I did like it. I think it ranked pretty high on the list of these stories that I enjoyed. It was nice to have this sort of fish out of water story. Like that's different than all the other ones. I think that's obviously, that goes without saying. But so that helped me identify with this character because you can sort of slot yourself in there without getting bit by a snake, which is nice.
Seems like this one did the best job of kind of taking it down to the commoner and giving you a reason to, like, again, see the gray and empathize with kind of the journey to what, you know, the start of some movies like, I bet you're wondering how I got here, you know, Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But this is, you know, a lot of this story is like no explanation of how I got from normal person farmer to, you know, dripping blood in the sand or whatever, you know. So I think that's real interesting.
Yeah, agreed. So it's a cool story. All right, let's do the last one.
Cool story, bro.
Guys, let's talk about The Iron Promise by Josh Reynolds, my personal best friend and friend of the show. This Iron Promise is a story about the Iron Golems hailing from Shaman. And so, what do we got here? So, apparently, we focus in on a warband of Iron Golems, but they are like representatives of a much larger organization,
Empire,
yeah. Like they hailed from, you know, a higher hierarchy, and they've been sent on a mission to go wrangle a Duarden, like weapons, or no, not even weaponsmith, but he just provides like raw material, I guess, for the weapons. He's sort of hunkered down in this volcano lair, and so he normally has to provide a certain like offering of materials for weapons, but he recently has stopped paying. Like, I feel like that's a classic story, right? Like we've seen stuff like this before, and so these Iron Golems are all ready to rough some dudes up in order to get what they want, or at the very least find out like why he stopped sending the payment, because you know, it's obviously that these materials are something they need to do their weaponsmithing, which is what Iron Golems are all about. So they approach this volcano lair. I feel like they have to fight something before they even get there, and I can't remember what it is. It's not. Were they also fighting Furies at that point? Right? Weren't they smashing Furies out of this guy?
It opens on them fighting Furies.
And then the crystals too were coming, and
that's a little bit later. But
yeah. So they have to navigate sort of the wilds, but they prove to do so very deftly, I guess, because they are good at what they do, and what they do is killing folks. So they smash through Furies, they get closer and closer. I think the crystals happen soon thereafter, right, as they're navigating the canyons and things. So there's this crystals that Paul was talking about before, that if you were to get any of if they were to touch you, or even if you were to shatter them and those pieces were to touch you, they'd steal your soul. As you look at them, you can see like the faces of the souls that have been stolen, and in fact, every soul that gets absorbed, it creates a new facet on this crystal that's sort of floating. But they're able to like fight them from afar, which is odd because Iron Golems don't really have much in the way of range, right? Besides
bolas.
like the bolas, okay.
Yeah.
So
everybody's got a bolus.
And so they're approaching this volcano. So they end up walking down like basically the front door. Because what do they have to be afraid of? Like they're on here on official business.
And Josh Reynolds takes the opportunity on the way to give you a little bit of insight. A couple times, like they have some philosophizing around the fire, which was kind of cool.
Sure. And then someone yells at him to stop philosophizing because like that's not what we're here for, sort of thing.
Well, it talks about the relationship between the different characters too. Like this is the most civilized of all the civilizations. Like Cypherlords are like, oh, this seems like really civilized. Then immediately they're like, no,
JK,
this is not at all
Weird.
civilized.
Not so.
And this is like, oh, it's, that's my brother, and like this is our people, and we're doing this thing. And
So Voss outlines his ethos. He says, be honest, be brave and brutal, and the gods would smile upon you. Be fearful, be a liar or dishonorable, and suffer the fate of all cowards. So,
Well, it's so rare to hear him or like anybody like speak about the importance of like honesty. Like the fact that he even like crosses his mind is like surprising to me. That like I don't know how often does it come up that like honesty does or doesn't matter in your life, but apparently it's enough to like slot into his ethos. And of course, it also contributes to the story that we're talking about because they roll up on the volcano. They have to fight some weird skeletons that like come to life as they're walking, which I don't really know how. Was that explained? They had runes pounded into them or something?
Yeah.
So basically they're navigating all these subsequent like creatures to eventually make their way into the volcano. No, I should tell you what, they have to wait outside for a little bit. They're waiting outside the front door, and they're like, I don't know, maybe they knock or they call or something, and they're like, one of the followers is like, what do we do? Like, and he's like, all right, well, no, he knows we're here. He'll let us in eventually. Which is what he does. Like the doors like slowly slide open, and they march right up into the volcano lair fortress, so on and so forth. They navigate through a series of rooms, and eventually they roll up on the Dwarden there, who's flanked by two giant
Ogres.
ogre breachers. With their weapons sort of grafted to their hands.
And he's standing with two hammers up over his head.
And the chain beard thing.
Bolo!
Yeah. And so they're like, hey, why haven't you sent us the stuff? And he's like, hey, I would if I could, but I can't, because in our process of digging deep into this volcano, or, we're always, digging deeper and deeper through our mine, we unlocked a treasure, but at the same time we found a monster, and that monster has proceeded to kill all my slaves and all my workers, and sorry man, like without workers and slaves, like I can't, provide the materials, the base metals that you need, but I'll tell you what, if you guys are willing to go down and rid me of this monster, the deal can still stand. Like I can get operations back up and running. So bring me this monster's head, and I'll be hunky-dory. This seems a little too good.
That's a quote, hunky-dory.
Yeah, hunky-dory. That's exactly what he said. He's a weird dwarven. And so they agree to it, and I mean, nobody feels happy about this decision, but like, Boss is all right. Yeah, like he knows that like something's up, and he's like, all right, well, this is what we've been sent here to do, and regardless if he's playing us straight or not, like we still have to deal with this issue that he has, sort of presented in front of us. So they proceed to navigate down into the depths of the mine, and so they're going level by level, and they see all sorts of like evidence of battles and stuff, but like it's like suspicious battles. It's not necessarily just like a monster rampaging through the different layers. There's like freed
cleanly cut chains,
exactly.
Something sharp, and
it looked like somebody tried to freeze something, right? It wasn't like everybody's killing something. It was like, oh, these people look like they were freed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they died.
And they were fighting like dead guards and stuff too. So like there's something, obviously, like there wouldn't be a story if there was something more than meets the eye here.
It's the twist.
Yep.
huge
So
piles of them like almost getting free, and then clearly have been just like burned into a nasty mess.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mithraxes, the Chaos Dwarf, has been melting them as they got close to escaping.
Yeah.
So.
Pretty gnarly stuff. And this sort of sets the Iron Golems a little uneasy. But as they make their way down to, whatever the final layer is, they find a box which is crackling with like Azerian energy. Whether they know it or whether we know it, I don't know for sure. But that's not the only thing they find. They are like, immediately beset by a quick-moving, metal-clad warrior. What? It's a Stormcast Eternal. Even in a Warcry anthology, we can't get away without having at least one Stormcast appear in these stories. And it's like a Vanguard or Hunter or something similar because he's moving real quick and he's got blades and a bolter pistol, not a bolter, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's a real quick clash, and they have a standoff. And basically, the Iron Golems like tell him, "Hey, like, look, stand down, and we'll, They say something, but what they really mean is we'll kill you quickly.
Surrender and you'll be treated honorably, he said. It wasn't a lie. Death by the hand of a Dominor of the Iron Legion was an honorable death as any. Resist and we'll take your head.
Yep, exactly. And then the Stormcast returns with like, oh wait, no, I was going to tell you the same thing.
This isn't a balanced match for you.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, they don't come to any sort of agreement. And
but this is a cool, different take on a Stormcast a little bit, just because it's from the perspective of these guys who not necessarily super familiar with it. Like, oh, what is this monster? It smells weird. It's moving way faster than it should for its size. Like, this is like a monster movie where the monster is the good guy, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to.
They have to be a little bit like cool armor, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you even do? Ow! Oh, it stings. You shocked me. So they proceed to fight, and like all the while, the Stormcast is like, "No, I just want to leave. Like, let me go." Like the whole point was he was trapped down there, and he couldn't get out. So there's a big battle. He's cleaving through Iron Golems left and right, but eventually they wear him down, and sort of like I don't know. They fight back up through the levels or something, because I think they get all the way to the gate, basically. But eventually he being the Stormcast is beaten by the Iron Golems through their teamwork, and they're pretty handy with their weapons as well.
And you're calling it he, but they call it it throughout. It's this weird monster thing, right?
Sure.
That's pretty fun.
It is fun. But they do kill him, it or whatever. But we all know what happens. Even in the 8 points, what happens to a Stormcast when he dies? He goes rocketing into space as a lightning bolt.
Rocket Man!
Yeah, guess how many heads he leaves? 0 heads. So eventually, after this, they're able to lick their wounds and head back up to the Duarden and say, "Hey, look, we cleared your monster out. Like, first of all, you got a weird magic box down there. Like, what's the deal with that? And like, let's get this agreement back up. Like, start mining and give us your the materials." And of course, the shifty Duarden is like, well, no. The agreement was you'd bring me a head, and I would start delivering the offerings that were needed. No head, deals off. I'm free to go. You can only imagine how well that went over with our boys, the Iron Golems, and they say, "Oh well, okay. You want to do this the hard way? Let's do it the hard way." And they proceed to attack. So they have to fight off the Ogres. The Duarden runs, but eventually they catch up to him, and they
he's running.
Yeah, the
Duarden running.
Look at his little legs. They proceed to catch him, and they lift him up and huck him into a lava pit or something. And that's the end of this treacherous little dwarf. And so that's all in a day's work for our Iron Golem friends. And they sort of dust their hands off, and all right, let's go head back and report what has happened.
They should be the new Josh Reynolds sequel, just that Fab 5 or something like that.
I feel like I told it very succinctly, but it's almost like a succinct story. Mm-hmm. A lot of the meat was just sort of the interactions, like interpersonally between the warband. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the better stories in this anthology of having that interpersonal connections. Mm-hmm. There are other good examples, but I think this is maybe one of the best, which I think we talk about. Like, that's one of Reynolds' sort of hallmarks, right? Is his people, his characters, and sort of how they interact with each other.
Yeah.
So the story was pretty straightforward with like a classic twist at the end, but I think it really shined with sort of those in between moments. That's me jumping ahead, I guess, to my little review. But did anything else in the story stand out for things that you guys liked?
It was kind of cool to see a warband fighting between themselves, right? Because the warband out of the box is the Dominar, is every character plus the Ogre Breachers and the Chaos Duarden. But in this story, those figures are fighting against each other.
And it kind of explains how those could exist in the warband. Like, why would they be here, or what purpose would they serve? So that is pretty neat.
It does make sense to me that the industrious, warband that needs to produce things would require the members to get along and work together and be a well-oiled machine on top of and that building a weapon, like building swords or whatever, there's a right way to do it. There's an honesty to it. And so I like that the qualities of the warband match kind of the requirements it takes to be an industrious group.
Yeah. And if you would have asked me who I thought, if you were to pick good guys of all the different types of warbands, who they would be, I don't know that I would have predicted the Iron Golems to be that, but at least in these stories, they came off as the most honorable, which is some aspect of of chaos in a sense. They are martial warriors, and there is a certain level of honorability. That's not a word. Honor that goes along with that.
Respect.
Yeah.
Right. You know.
I agree. So I already talked about what I thought about the book or story. What did you guys think about it?
I think you covered my thoughts pretty well. I enjoyed it. As I already said, I liked it for the different take. What would a Stormcast look to somebody who hadn't encountered it very much? And it was I like the Stormcast as monster in a monster movie. That was pretty clever.
Yeah, I agree. It was also fun to just see a normal Stormcast that had been in the realms for a long time, right? We talk about, this person died, right? But we don't have many stories where it's literally just one guy's left, everybody else has been killed. It's just a lone survivor trying to survive, right?
There's only so many terrible fates that can befall a Stormcast, given that quote unquote they're immortal. There's only so many awful things that can happen to them, and being trapped in the belly of a Chaos Dwarf volcano lair is probably one of them, right? You can't get out. It's amazing to think that he could just be locked behind one portcullis and that just ruins him. There's nothing I can do about this. And ostensibly, I think they do starve, I guess, eventually one day. But still, he knows that if I just died, I would go, rocketing back to his ear, but I can't because I'm locked down here. So that is the last story. We've covered some ground here. Okay, so let's maybe take a look at some standard questions. We could do our classic, who is your dude, through all of the stories. Let's just go across all of them. We'll make it quick, because I feel like we probably alluded to some of them. I'll just do mine real fast. I think my dude is actually Samili Kalkus from the Method of Madness, which is that Mirror Blade fighter. I think she was super awesome. She's a great, a pretty compelling backstory. You may not be rooting for her boss, but I found myself rooting for her throughout the story. Plus, there's just an interesting way to sort of explain how someone gets sort of conscripted into that army. I do like the Cypher Lords. It's one of my favorite war bands in this grouping, and so I think that she's a good representative of what it means to be part of that. Next,
I'd go with Merrick from Eight-Tailed Naga. I thought he was one of the most identifiable or easiest characters to identify with. You could and it made sense. He was kind of written almost as a proxy for the reader, so you could be introduced to this along with him. But you talk about the human connections and stuff. He even after his wife's been dead a while, he's still honoring her memory, and I like that. I like that take on what it is to be someone who lives in a place saturated with chaos, still has these human elements.
Let's go around the horn, Paul.
I liked Locke. I thought he was a cool character. Doing all the fighting. The fight scenes were super cool in that one, for sure. But it was also just... he wasn't some guy with a crow suit, right? He was a little bit more than that, which was pretty cool.
I really liked Thornwinder, because for most of the book, except for the point where he kills the chieftain or whatever guy, it's man versus wilderness, and it's easy to root for. Hey, that's pretty good, but he has that huge twist at the end. But it's such an underdog story, and I feel like you don't feel bad rooting for him until the end. And yeah, so I dug that.
And then I was rooting for his little buddy who he killed.
Yeah, he was the only actual good character in the whole anthology.
He was cool. All right,
just pops in with an arrow.
Another question. Let's maybe just give one example. What's one thing that you learned about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
You can farm blood.
Okay, sure, check.
It was interesting to see what a city in the 8 points, the glimpses we got at Carne Grad, it's pretty awful to live there. Like they would just have run of the mill details like this, the vizier, this woman, the not butler, but whatever she was, the liaison for the guy who was in town had like a coat made of like human leather detailed out with teeth or something, like human teeth. So it clicked. I was like, oof, just pretty awful details. And I was just like, yeah, that's my evening cape, whatever. So, but to get some sense that somehow it was a functional city, despite it being in such an awful place, was interesting.
For me, I think it was just seeing, more of the layers of how people live in the mortal realm, specifically in the 8 points, and that in some aspects it may not be too different than how people live in other parts of the realms. Like there's just bad parts of the realms as well. So I think it was the nuance and when we saw this Warcry get released or launched, like just these more layers of chaos than we ever saw before, I think just adds more layers. You can imagine how, like, in some of their stories, like the cities of Sigmar, like the people of Order live at different levels of good and evil, whatever. So I think it was that you come into this expecting it to be, all right, these are all bad, bad, bad. And there's just enough gray in here to make you go, I might like them.
Yeah. I appreciate it also because it gave, in the old world, you had the Norse, which were the, like, basically slaves to darkness, right? They're marauders, but they didn't openly worship Khorne or Tzeentch, whatever. They prayed to them. And now we have a fully fleshed out, like, here's a city in each of the realms where this is what happens to normal people when they're in a bad place. And that's super cool.
And almost to that end, the fact that we have these sort of 6 very disparate warbands, and those the 2 more that are coming out, the fact that like each of these are so very different almost proves the fact that there can't just be the 6 or the 8, but there's countless versions of this, and almost every single other one that we don't know of yet, whether we'll ever learn about it or not, are just as equally as unique or out there or wacky. And it just shows that like the fact that we've spread the scope of what chaos means that you can go that much farther, and that there's always a new direction to go with chaos. It proves that there are no bounds on what chaos looks like.
Well, the other thing is, if you flip that coin, right, they're from the realm, so there could be a neighboring city that shares almost all of their beliefs, but in an order fashion, right? Like, that's quite possible that we look at it and we say, oh, Corvus Cabal, they act like ravens and they do this because they believe in the Great Gatherer, right? Well, but maybe to them the Great Gatherer is a bad person, but to the next city down the road, the Great Gatherer is a good person. Or there's another god that's the flip of the Great Gatherer, but they still wear all the feathers and they still gather everything, and they, it just expands what's possible in the mortal realms.
Sure. All right, let's move on to some listener questions. So we did a little different for this episode in that instead of going to Twitter to ask for questions, we just focused on our Discord channel, which can be found at www.themortalrealms.com/discord.
So get in there.
Yeah.
Is that www.themortalrealms.com/discord?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And so there we go. I know we can get a more centralized focus grouping of folks to ask questions, but we got some good ones. So Stepador, am I saying that right? Yep. From the Discord channel, wanted to know what our favorite fight scene was. My personally was anytime the Cypher Lords and the Corvus Cabal fought, because those go toe to toe, and they sort of are equally matched in my mind.
There's one where specifically, like the Corvus member, like unfolds from the ceiling and descends down. You're like, oh, it's on! Here we go. It was exciting.
Wait, you just hear the fight music in the background. Where'd that come from? Yeah, that's true. Did anybody have any other fight scenes that they loved very much?
The Arachnarok fight scene wasn't cool necessarily because of the Arachnarok, but because you have these like super epic little fight scenes coming up, and then they're fighting something that's actually powerful in the game, and everybody's just like obliterated. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna bend around and evade this thing. It's like, no, it's just too powerful. Everybody dies.
Same story I enjoyed where the where the Untamed Beasts warband exploded up from burst up from the sand. You had like a little warning where Like somebody's like, that's a print. Like, are you sure? Like, it's just kind of a small divot in the sand. Like, I was a hunter in my false life before I was one of the Splintered Fang. That's a print. And so they have this slight warning before all of a sudden, whoosh, here it comes. So I enjoyed that fight a lot.
You have a good fight, Eric?
I think it's Thornwinder versus the Harrow. This weird, where it's so surreal. Like, he rips the thing's face off with his bare hands. I'm like, what is going on? So, it was too cool.
Where do you find a bear to get those hands? Darth Alex Nygaard asked, are the cults believable as living, existing, long-term culture?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some I'd want to know some more about, but I think there's examples of it being pretty well realized, some more than other, just because of how their particular stories were structured.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Splintered Fang, as we already mentioned, that's felt pretty well lived in. I think we got a pretty good sense of the Cypher Lords from there. You get an idea of how they operate.
I feel like the Corvus Cabal it has the least tying it together, and at any moment it could just disappear.
Yeah.
And then maybe reform later. The Unmade, I feel like you could be like generations.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Corvus Cabal feel like it's fleeting.
Yeah.
But I don't know that means that it couldn't be a culture that kind of sticks around in greater numbers or lesser numbers, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, that might be a feature rather than a bug, like
that's
intentional.
Right.
But I would love to know that that's a feature instead of being like, hey, I guess this is the way it works, right? Like,
you don't get to know.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes not knowing is fun.
So to me, Iron Golem totally makes sense. Like, everything made sense the way it worked, except for Corvus Cabal. And part of that might just be from the realm of shadow, right? We don't know. We're not given that. So,
also, I think for me, the Unmade just seemed like hard to sustain. Like, I got it from their perspective, but like, I don't know, how does that society continue to like work?
You have a whole lower level of just acupuncture junkies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I guess there's that lower level that just straight up don't have their stuff cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
They're all pyramid schemes.
Mm-hmm. Ain't that the truth? Life's a pyramid scheme. Josh from Madison here, Fractal. What is his name? Fractal Rain there. But from the last episode of Dogs of Warcry, he asked us, which areas described in the book did you find most evocative? I'm going to take this before Davey takes it, because the city of Carne Grad is, I think, the right answer to that question. I think we spent a fair enough time there to like really paint a picture of what it would be like to live there, aka awful. And so that's where I enjoyed.
Is there enough where Carne Grad feels like its own character, or is it we just get light bits?
We only get part of it. We get like part of one district.
I think it could be like a full-on novel set there. Would probably.
I think an anthology around Carne Grad could be cool, where Carne Grad's the main character.
Yeah, it'd also be cool to like if you got an anthology where there was like a through line through all the different like short stories, and they always had some connecting aspect. Which I guess maybe Carne Grad would be that. Do you guys have any other environments that struck a chord with you?
The forge from Iron Golems, like built in the side of a volcano, and this huge I felt like I could picture what was going on when he was writing about it.
I could too. It's very well described. Yeah.
Thornwinder it? No, just kidding.
You love that. Francis Vanderhuge. What do Chaos humans think about other Grand Alliance representatives trampling their home spoil? That's the first question. Utterly and completely, almost utterly and completely unmentioned, with the exception of maybe the goblins, like the Grots, I suppose, too. But it's really not brought up, which, maybe Anthology too. But like that is a whole like second half of this, game or this setting is all the other non-Chaos Grand Alliances. They're not nothing. Like they do have some effect there. So I'd be interested to read more. And then the second question is, why are these fish elves in our sacred gladiatorial arena? The age-old question. I find myself asking myself that every day. Do you guys remember what like their mission is? Does anybody know what the Deepkin like mission is in Warcry? I'm getting a lot of questioning looks.
I'll defer to the people who did a podcast on it.
Yeah, I haven't read that. Some of them aren't as heavy, and for them it's kind of just another kind of place to go and get souls to
Sure, I'll tell you what, to find the answer to that question, listen to future episodes of Dogs of Warcry, where I'm sure it will be referenced.
Can I alter the question slightly, though? Like, just to be something like, is this a place that is believable that other alliances would live here, like would be able to pursue here, right? Based on this anthology, these 6 stories, can you see that, right? Like, we had the Gloomspite Gits already, right? And that felt very natural to me. Like, oh, of course the Gloomspite would be here. We had a Vanguard Hunter in the Iron Golems, right? Like, that totally made sense to me that fit as well, right? Is there something that doesn't make sense, or,
No, I don't think so, but I think that's the beauty of the AOS setting, is you can give motivations to anybody for almost anything, so.
Yep.
All right, cool. Let's get to our final, last review. I feel like we've done so many reviews, if anything we say is going to be redundant, but I'll just say that, like, as a final cap, I love the variety. I love all the different places that we got to go, but that we're still sort of centralizedly connected in, like, a relatively central location. There were some I really liked, some that I thought were ho-hum, but just generally as a full body of work, I think it's worth combing through, and maybe just, if you want, identify the ones that catch your interest, or, relate to the warbands that you play. But all in all, they do a really good job in their anthologies to sort of collate short stories, and this is another great example of that.
it definitely felt like we were all in the same place, which was cool to have it from 6 different authors. I could tell a little bit that, like, it wasn't necessarily we're all going to collaborate and write 6 completely different stories, because some of the storylines were a little bit similar, right? How the Serpent's Fang were going after an item, and then the next story they're going after an item, right? Like, but they still felt like they were the same warband, even with the Unmade being different, right? It still felt like they were fighting the Unmade. It just didn't feel like they were fighting the miniatures of the warband. So I think, as far as that, like, that's the most important thing for an anthology when you have different authors, is to make it feel like you're still set in the same universe. And I think they achieved that very, very well.
Yeah, I think an anthology collection is nice in that, again, it's easy to digest, and I think this one gives you enough of these nuggets that satiate. At the same time, they're, I don't know, for me, the danger sometimes of an anthology is that it's easy to skip it because there's nothing major to the overall plot is happening, so you can take it or leave it. I think it's worth the time. These are worth the time you spend on each one, and really enjoyed the ones that I got to. I think the missed opportunity may have been the order of these to give Carne Grad more of a kind of arc. So, starting outside the city, keeping the ones that are inside the city together, and then back outside of the city or something like that. But I thought it was cool.
For overall, yeah, I would say, like, before thumbs up, thumbs down, like, the overall vibe that you got from what it was like to live here was that, we talked about how Pyrrhic victory was often a thing that was happening in these stories. And it's not, your goal isn't to survive, your goal isn't victory even. Your goal is, like, to live and die the way that you in accordance with your beliefs, whatever they happen to be here, and often they're pretty awful beliefs. But it was an interesting way to think about how, if you're living somewhere where like the presence of these chaos gods is unquestionable, like it's there, then how do you go about living your life, and like what does being mortal mean in that context? And so it was neat to see how they lived there. So anyway, as far as setting out what it hoped to do, I thought it did a great job of that. So I, whatever rating you want to use, I go 4 out of 5 on it. So
Cool.
I would also add, if you like this, or like that's a cool topic, that's a cool idea, there is also another short that was released in White Dwarf about Untamed Beasts, and there was another e-short that was released by Sarah Cockwell about Untamed Beasts as well.
Well, they're getting a lot of screen time.
And also I'm reading through Warcry by Darius Hinks, and that also has a lot of the same touches, a lot of the same feeling, but not specific to the Blood Moon Spoil.
Sure.
So.
And go back and listen to our Scourge of Fate episode. We spent some time in
absolutely
the 8 points as well. And listener, we told you what we thought about the book, but if you've read it, please reach out and let us know what you thought about the anthology. Which of the stories were your favorites? Which were your least favorite? Who your dude was? We'd love to hear feedback and get your take on the book as well. All right, let's wrap it up.
It's time to put a muzzle on this episode. If it was a good dog, support the show with a positive review on iTunes, sharing it with friends, joining us for hobby discussions at themortalrealms.com/Discord, or leave a tip at themortalrealms.com/Patreon. More content is available at themortalrealms.com and on Twitter at Dogs of Warcry.
Welcome to the Midwest side, those ruthless, narratively driven podcast you'll ever turn right. I'll be installed. We get your boss dice, roll and roll, and the spawns never stolen, no smoke with the Dogs of Warcry.